Nora Ashford had eaten breakfast at her mother's table for the last time on a Tuesday morning in March, and she had known it while she was eating it. The eggs were perfectly poached. The toast was cut in triangles the way it had always been cut, since Nora was 5 years old and sitting in a chair that was too tall for her feet to reach the floor. The orange juice was fresh, not from a carton, because Vivienne Ashford did not allow cartons in her kitchen. She did not allow a great many things. Over the years, the list had grown so long that Nora had stopped trying to remember all of it and simply tried to remember herself instead. Vivienne sat across from her at the long oak table, dressed already at 8 in the morning as though she were expecting guests, which she was not. She wore her hair pinned in the way she always wore it, not a strand out of place. Her posture was the kind that other women paid people to teach them. Her eyes were the same pale gray as Nora's, but on Vivienne they looked different. On Vivienne, they looked like something that had decided not to feel anything and was very good at it. Nora ate her egg. She did not look up. "I have spoken to Gerald Pemberton," Vivienne said. Nora set her fork down very carefully on the edge of her plate. "He is available through the summer," Vivienne continued. "His family is in good standing. The Pembertons have held their estate for 4 generations. He is 34. He is not perhaps exciting, but you are 26, Nora, and excitement is a thing that people your age confuse with happiness. They are not the same thing." "I know they are not the same thing," Nora said. "Then you will understand that I am not asking you to be excited. I am asking you to be sensible." Nora picked up her fork again. She looked at the egg. She looked at the way the yolk had broken and run across the white slowly like something that had been holding its shape and then simply gave up. She thought about Gerald Pemberton, who she had met exactly twice, once at a charity auction where he had bid on a painting he clearly did not like, and once at a dinner party where he had spent 40 minutes explaining to her the finer points of property tax. He was not a bad man. He was not even an unkind man. He was the kind of man who was neither of those things, and had spent his entire life in that safe and comfortable middle, and would spend the rest of it there too. "I am not going to marry Gerald Pemberton," Nora said. Vivienne did not pause. She did not show surprise. She simply lifted her coffee cup and set it back down with the smallest, most deliberate sound. "You are 26, she said again. "The gallery does not pay you enough to keep your flat, and we both know that your father's portion of the inheritance is held in trust until you marry or until you turn 35. That is 9 years away, Nora. 9 years is a very long time to be stubborn." "I am not being stubborn," Nora said. "I am telling you what I am not going to do." "There is a difference." Vivienne looked at her then, really looked at her, in the way she sometimes did when she was weighing something, calculating something, deciding whether a softer approach might work better than the one she was already using. "Your father would have wanted you to be taken care of," she said. That landed. They both knew it would. It always did. Nora's father, Charles Ashford, had died when Nora was 19, a quiet and sudden death that came without warning on an ordinary Wednesday morning, and the grief of it had restructured everything, the way an earthquake restructures ground that looked perfectly stable before. Vivienne had handled the loss by becoming, if possible, more precisely herself, more controlled, more certain, more convinced that the world was a dangerous and unpredictable place, and that the only defense against it was order, rank, and a good address. Nora had handled it differently. She had started painting. She had started listening to music too loud at midnight. She had started making choices that were entirely her own, small, defiant choices, one after another, the way you stack small stones to make a wall. "Dad wanted me to be happy," Nora said. "Happy?" Vivienne said the word as though she were examining it for defects. "Yes, and you will be. Gerald Pemberton has a house in Wiltshire and a flat in Kensington. You will not have to worry about your rent. You will not have to smile at people trying to sell overpriced artwork to men who do not know what they are looking at. You will have time, you will have security. Those things become happiness, Nora, eventually. They become it without you noticing." Nora looked at her mother. She looked at the iron set of her shoulders, the practiced calm of her face, the way she had made herself into something that could not be touched by anything unpredictable or soft or true. She thought about what it would cost to become that. She thought about how long it must have taken. "I will think about it," Nora said. She knew, saying it, that she would not think about it. Not in the way her mother meant. She would think about it the way you think about a door that you know you are never going to open, just checking to make sure the lock is still holding. She finished her breakfast. She thanked her mother for it. She collected her coat from the hook in the hallway, and she walked out into the grey March morning, and she stood on the pavement for a moment and breathed. The air smelled of rain and bus exhaust, and something faintly floral from the florist on the corner. It smelled like the city, like her city, the one she had built for herself out of small choices and long walks, and 6 years of underpaid work at a gallery that she loved with an intensity that she had never quite been able to explain to anyone who had not felt something similar. She pulled her phone from her coat pocket and called her friend Donna, who answered on the second ring with a mouth full of toast. "She did it again," Nora said. "Pemberton," Donna said. "Pemberton." "Right," said Donna, "come to mine. I'll make more toast. You can be angry at my kitchen table instead of on the street." Nora was at Donna's flat in 35 minutes. Donna was 28, worked in publishing, wore her hair in a way that looked effortless but took a great deal of effort, and had been Nora's closest friend since they were both 17 and had been placed in the same dormitory at a school neither of them had particularly liked. Donna had a way of listening that made you feel that what you were saying was important, but also that perhaps it was not the end of the world. She made tea, she did not make more toast. She sat across from Nora at her small kitchen table and listened while Nora explained in detail every word of the morning's conversation. She said happiness becomes security, Nora finished, that you stop being able to tell the difference. That is either very cynical or very wise, Donna said, and I genuinely cannot decide which. Both, Nora said, that is the worst part, it is both. Donna wrapped both hands around her mug. Are you going to do it? No. Good. Gerald Pemberton explained tax brackets to me for 20 minutes at Harriet's dinner, and I considered faking a family emergency. Nora laughed. It came out sharp and short and surprised her. The thing is, she said, once the laugh had settled, she is not entirely wrong about the money. The flat is getting expensive. The gallery is not going to give me a raise this year. I have worked out the numbers, and they are not comfortable numbers. They are never comfortable numbers, Donna said. That is the nature of numbers. She knows that, she is using it. She has always known exactly where the pressure points are. Donna looked at her steadily. So what are you going to do? Nora looked out the kitchen window. There was a square of grey sky visible between two buildings. A pigeon was sitting on the sill. It looked as though it had been there for some time and had not come to any conclusions. I don't know yet, she said, but it will not be Gerald Pemberton. The next 3 weeks were ordinary. She went to work. She stood in the white rooms of the gallery and helped people find things they did not know they were looking for. She wrote small descriptions of paintings for the website, trying to put into clean, simple sentences the things that made her feel something when she stood in front of them. She ran on Tuesday and Thursday mornings. She called her mother once briefly about nothing in particular, and her mother did not mention Gerald Pemberton, and Nora knew that this was its own kind of pressure. She thought about the trust. 9 years. The number sat in her mind like a stone she kept picking up and putting down. Her father had set it up before she was born, in the careful estate planning way of men who assume the future will be neater than it turns out to be. The condition was not unusual. It was the kind of condition that made perfect sense in the abstract, marry or wait until 35, and felt, in practice, like being told you could have the umbrella once the rain had stopped. She was at work on a Thursday afternoon when the conversation happened that would, later, she would think of as the last quiet conversation before everything changed. Her colleague Owen, 22, enthusiastic about everything, the kind of person who visibly enjoyed Mondays, had been rearranging a small display of prints near the front of the gallery. Nora was at the desk, updating records. The gallery was empty except for the two of them. Do you think, Owen said, without looking up from the print he was leveling, that people know when they are about to make the most important decision of their lives? Like, is there a signal? Nora looked at him. Why? I am trying to decide between 2 jobs, and I keep waiting to feel certain, and I just feel the same amount of uncertain about both of them. There is no signal, Nora said. You only ever know in retrospect. You look back and think, oh, that was the day, but at the time it just felt like a day. Owen considered this. That is either very freeing or very terrifying. Both, Nora said, for the second time in 3 weeks. That Saturday she went to the farmer's market on Finsbury Road, because it was the kind of Saturday morning that needed doing something with, cool and bright with a light wind off the river, and a sky that had decided to try being blue. She did not have a particular list. She wanted apples and coffee, and possibly something from the bread stall that would make her feel that the weekend was worth the name. She was at the apple stall when she heard the crash. 2 stalls down, a woman carrying too many bags and a folded pushchair had walked into a man who was carrying someone else's grocery crates, and the collision had sent apples, a canvas bag, a jar of something amber, and a set of keys skittering across the wet cobblestones in every direction. The pushchair had folded open. The woman looked mortified. The man who had been carrying the crates looked as though his first instinct, before anything else, was to laugh, and then he controlled it into something more appropriate and started helping instead. Nora was already crouching before she had decided to move, gathering apples from around people's feet, handing them back. "I am so sorry," the woman with the pushchair was saying. "I thought I had a better grip than I had." "Nobody got hurt," the man said. "That's the whole thing." He was picking up the keys. He handed them back to her. He had a calm, easy way of moving, the kind of ease that is not performance. He was wearing dark jeans and a gray jacket that had seen a lot of weather. His wristwatch had a cracked face. His shoes were the kind of shoes that a person wears until they are done wearing them, and then wears a little longer. He looked up and met Nora's eyes across the scattered apples. "Thank you," he said. "I didn't do much," she said. "You got the ones that were rolling toward the drain. That was the important ones." The woman had gathered herself and her things and was moving away, apologizing to a radius of about 4 stalls. The man watched her go with a look that was mostly warmth and just a small trace of amusement. "That was her 3rd trip to the market today," he said. "She told me while I was helping her with the crates. She does 3 trips because her freezer is small and she likes everything fresh." Nora looked at him. "How do you know she is not buying for a restaurant?" "The pushchair," he said. "Restaurant owners do not bring a pushchair to a farmer's market. They have a van." Nora thought about this. It was the sort of observation that was so obvious once someone said it that you could not understand why you had not thought of it yourself. She handed back the last apple to the stall owner, who had been watching all of this with the patient expression of a man who had seen many things happen near his apples. "I am Callum," he said. "Nora," she said. They stood in the middle of the cobblestone aisle with people moving around them, and neither of them moved away immediately, which was itself a small decision, the kind you make without noticing you are making it. "Are you here for anything in particular?" he said. "Apples," she said, "and bread, and something I won't decide on until I see it." "That's the right way to do a market," he said. "I'm here because I owe someone 3 crates of delivery and I get paid £30 for it, and that is my Saturday morning." "That's honest," she said. "It's not glamorous," he said, and then smiled, and it was a smile that did not ask anything of her, which was, she thought, unusual. They walked together to the bread stall, not because either of them suggested it exactly, but because they were both going that direction, and it seemed reasonable. He told her about the crate delivery, which was for a woman named Edna who had a small catering operation run out of her home and could not drive. He had been helping her for about 6 weeks. He was paid mostly in cash and occasionally in soup. "Is the soup good?" Nora said. "Remarkably," he said. "She makes a carrot and coriander that would change your view of soup as a concept." Nora bought a sourdough loaf and a small round of something seeded that she had not planned on. He bought nothing, because he had already been paid in cash and did not need to spend it immediately. He drank a paper cup of coffee from the stall at the end, while she looked at jars of chutney that she eventually did not buy. They talked for 40 minutes. She did not quite track the time until afterward. They talked about the market and about the city and about a documentary she mentioned that he had not seen but was interested in. He talked about a book he was partway through and could not decide if he liked or was simply committed to at this point. She told him that was a feeling she understood. He did not ask her what she did in a way that was really asking how much she earned or where she fit in any particular order of things. He asked her what she liked about her work, which was different, and she told him, and he listened in a way that was real listening. At the end of the 40 minutes, when she had a loaf and a jar and a bag of apples and really ought to have been heading home, he said, "I don't usually do this, and I want to be honest that I know it's a bit odd at a market, but would you want to have coffee sometime? Real coffee, not from a paper cup." She looked at him, at the cracked watch, at the gray jacket, at the easy, unhurried way he was standing, as though the answer was not the most important thing and she should take as long as she needed. Yes, she said. She gave him her number. He saved it in a phone that was 2 generations older than hers and had a small crack in the bottom left corner of the screen. He said he would text her. She said she hoped he would. She walked home through the bright Saturday morning with her bag of market things, and she thought about the apples rolling toward the drain, and the way he had said that was the important ones without really thinking about it, and she thought that was probably the detail she would remember later. She did not know yet what she would remember it alongside. He texted on Sunday evening, just after 7, when Nora was sitting on her kitchen floor eating crackers and reading a catalog from the gallery that she had already read twice, but could not quite bring herself to put down. The text said, "Carrot and coriander soup tomorrow evening. Edna insists I share it. She has never met you and already likes the sound of you. No pressure, but she is a very compelling person." Nora read it twice. She looked at the ceiling. She thought about the cracked watch and the gray jacket and the way he had carried someone else's crates on a Saturday morning for £30. She thought about Gerald Pemberton explaining tax brackets to Donna at a dinner party. She typed back, "What time?" He picked her up at 6:30 in a car that was not flashy and not new and had a pine air freshener hanging from the mirror that smelled absolutely nothing like pine. He apologized for the air freshener. She said she liked it. He said, "No one likes it, you're being kind." She said, "I am not kind about pine, it is genuinely not unpleasant." He laughed and they drove to Edna's, which was a first-floor flat in Stoke Newington above a pharmacy, and Edna herself turned out to be 63, originally from Cork, with reading glasses on a chain around her neck and the specific confidence of a woman who had spent decades learning exactly what she thought and had stopped apologizing for it. The soup was, in fact, remarkable. They sat at Edna's small kitchen table with soup and bread, and a conversation that moved the way good conversations move, without agenda, without anyone steering it anywhere, just going where it went and being fine with where it went. Edna had opinions about film, about local politics, about the quality of parsley available in the market compared to 15 years ago. Callum clearly loved her in the way you love someone who has always told you the truth. Nora noticed that first evening that Callum did not talk about money or about ambition or about what he was building toward. He talked about what he was doing. The difference was something she could feel but not quite yet articulate. She had grown up around people who talked exclusively about where they were going. Her mother's circle was one long conversation about destinations, about the right schools, the right marriages, the right addresses, the right everything. It was exhausting in the way that only things are exhausting that you have been around for so long you mistake the exhaustion for normal. Callum talked about the book he was reading and a bus route he had discovered that went through a part of the city he had not known. He talked about Edna's catering job on the following weekend and whether the Valo events were going to hold their shape, which was a genuine concern he had thought about, apparently more than once. Nora found herself talking more than she usually did, with someone she had known for less than 48 hours. They stayed until 9. Edna sent them away with a container of leftover soup and a small packet of biscuits she said she had too many of, though she looked as though she had bought them specifically. In the car on the way back, Nora said, "She bought those biscuits for tonight." "Yes," Callum said, "she does that. She makes things look like surplus so you take them without feeling obligated. It's a kindness technique. She has been doing it for years." "You pay attention," Nora said. "I like people," he said simply, and said it in a way that meant it. He dropped her outside her flat on Highbury Grove. He did not come up. She did not invite him. They said good night on the pavement in the mild, dark evening, and he said he had had a very good time and she said she had too, and neither of them overdressed it. She went upstairs and finished the crackers she had started before he texted. They had dinner 3 days later at a Turkish restaurant that he had found by walking past it twice and noticing it was always full. Full restaurants, he said, were the only reliable restaurant review. She agreed. They ate well. She paid for half and he did not make it uncomfortable. He was easy company, not in the frictionless, effortful way that some people are easy company because they are working at it. Easy in the way that comes from not needing anything from the conversation except the conversation. She told him about her mother on their 4th time together, which was a walk along the canal on a wet Friday evening that neither of them had planned to be long but became long anyway. She did not tell him all of it. She told him enough. She said her mother had strong ideas about what Nora's life should look like and that those ideas did not particularly match Nora's own. "What does she want your life to look like?" he said. "Secure," Nora said. "Settled, matched to a man whose family is known, whose income is known, whose future is a known thing." Callum was quiet for a moment. The canal was dark, and the reflections of the streetlights on the water moved with the small current. "And what do you want?" he said. "I don't know," she said. "I know what I don't want more clearly than I know what I want. That is the honest answer." He nodded. Not in the way people nod when they are waiting to respond, but in the way people nod when they are actually receiving what you said. "That's a reasonable place to be," he said. "You can navigate from don't want just as well as from want. It just feels less comfortable." She looked at him, the wet canal path, the sound of the water, the cold April air. "What about you?" she said. "What is your family like?" Something shifted very slightly in his face. It was not closed off exactly. It was more like a window that had been open and now went to half. "Complicated," he said. "I don't talk about it much." She did not push. She understood complicated. She understood not wanting to carry certain things into a new space where everything was still clean and unhurried. She had done the same thing. They walked until they reached a bridge and then turned back, and by the time they were back at the road she had forgotten she had even asked, which she thought later was probably what he had hoped for. By the end of April she had seen him 9 times. She had not counted until she counted, and then she thought, 9 times in 4 weeks is more than casual but less than certain, and that space between those two things was interesting. Donna met him on a Sunday in late April briefly at a coffee place near Donna's flat, where Nora had stopped on the way back from Callum's neighborhood. It was not planned. She had texted Donna and Donna had said she was 5 minutes away and would come too. Donna sat with them for 20 minutes and drank a coffee and was perfectly pleasant, and then she had somewhere to be and left, and afterward when Nora called her she said, "Right, okay." "What does that mean?" Nora said. "It means I see why," Donna said. "He looks at you like you are interesting. Most men look at you like you are either attractive or not attractive, and that is the whole evaluation. He actually looks at you like you are interesting. It is very disarming." Nora sat with that for a while. "His shoes are terrible," she said. "Yes," said Donna, "and he doesn't care, that's the thing." It was in May that her mother called about the trust again. Nora was at work when the call came through. She let it go to voicemail. She listened to the voicemail in the back office during her lunch break, standing by the window with a sandwich she had not yet opened. Her mother's voice was even and precise, as it always was. "I have spoken to the solicitor. The trust, as you know, cannot be accessed until the conditions are met. I want to make sure you are not making your decision from stubbornness rather than genuine preference. Gerald Pemberton asked about you again. He is patient, Nora. That is a quality that should not be underestimated. I will be home on Thursday and I would like you to come to dinner. Just dinner. Nothing needs to be decided." Nora ate her sandwich. She thought about the word patient, about how patience could be a virtue and could also be a waiting room. About how some people were patient in the way that meant they were kind, and some people were patient in the way that meant they were certain you would come around eventually. She did not go to dinner on Thursday. She went instead to Callum's flat, which she had not yet been to, and they made pasta with things he had from the fridge, which were onions and a tin of tomatoes and some hard cheese he had to grate himself because there was no pre-grated option, and it was one of the better meals she had eaten that month. His flat was small, that was the first thing, not uncomfortably small but with the specific compact character of a place that a person has arranged carefully to make the most of what is there. Books on shelves he had clearly built himself, slightly uneven but solid. A print on the wall that she recognized as a woodblock reproduction, the kind you find at market stalls, not expensive, chosen because someone liked it. A kitchen where every surface was clear and the single pan hanging above the stove was well used and well cleaned. She looked at things while he cooked, not in a rude way, in the way you look at things when you are trying to understand a person from the context of where they live. There were no photographs on the wall. There were books, but the books had been recently read rather than displayed. There was no television. There was a radio on the counter, the old kind with a dial, and it was playing something classical she did not recognize but liked. "You don't have a television," she said. "I go out," he said, "or I read. Or I listen to the radio. I found that I spent time in front of the television without meaning to, and the time felt different afterward than the time I spent doing other things. Thinner, she said. He turned and looked at her. Yes, exactly. She sat at his kitchen table while he stirred the tomatoes, and she thought oddly about a word her father used to use. Grounded. He used to say you want to find people who are grounded, not rooted in one spot, not unwilling to move, but grounded in themselves, like they know which direction is down. Her father would have liked Callum, she was nearly certain of it. She did not say that out loud. It was too large a thought for a pasta dinner on a Thursday evening when she had decided, in a small act of rebellion, not to go to her mother's. In June things shifted, not dramatically, not with any single event that she could point to later and say that was the moment, but she became aware gradually that she had stopped imagining her life without him in it, that when she thought about the future, which she did reluctantly and with some wariness, he appeared in it naturally, the way furniture appears in a room you live in, not placed just there. She also became aware that he was cautious, not about her. He was never cautious about her, never measured or strategic, never seemed to be managing what he revealed. But there were edges, certain edges that he did not walk to. Certain questions he answered briefly and then turned gently in a different direction. His family, where he had grown up specifically. What he had done before the crate deliveries, and the odd jobs that seemed to make up his current existence. She asked him once, in June, what he had done before London. He was quiet for 3 seconds. She counted, not intentionally, just noticed. I was in a situation I needed to leave, he said, so I left it, and I came here and started over with what I could carry. She looked at him. Was it a bad situation? It was a situation I had not chosen and could not change, he said, which is sometimes the same as bad and sometimes just is what it is. She thought about her mother's house, the long oak table, the perfectly poached eggs. She thought about the trust and the 9 years and Gerald Pemberton's particular variety of patience. Yes, she said. I understand that. And she did, she understood it completely, which was perhaps why she did not press further. When someone offers you the understanding, you do not always need the explanation along with it. Summer came with a heat that London is never quite prepared for. The city got loud and slow at the same time. The gallery was busy with tourists who wanted art and culture and a place to sit down out of the sun. Nora worked long days and met Callum in the evenings after. They went to the park and sat on the grass. They went to a pub quiz that they did adequately in but did not win. They cooked together in his kitchen and in hers, and there was a comfortable, unspoken naturalness to it that she was aware enough to recognize was not an accident. One evening in July, Donna called her. I need to ask you something and I need you to tell me the truth, Donna said. All right, said Nora. Are you in love with him? Nora stood at her kitchen window. The evening was warm. The pigeons on the opposite roof were settling for the night. I think so, she said. That is not an answer. I know, Nora said, but it is what I have. Donna was quiet for a moment. Okay, she said, then I have to tell you something. I looked him up. What? Nora said. I looked him up. Callum, no last name given, small flat, odd jobs, no television. I looked him up on the basis of those details in a photograph and I found nothing, absolutely nothing. No social media, no professional profile, nothing in any local records I could access without being, a government, which I am not. Some people aren't online, Nora said. Some people aren't online, Donna agreed. But no one is that completely not online, not unless they chose to be, not unless they are being very careful about something. The pigeons shifted on the opposite roof. One of them rearranged itself and settled again. He told me he came to London to start over, Nora said. I know, Donna said. I remember. I am not saying it is bad, I am saying it is something, and you should know it is something. Nora stood at the window for a long time after they hung up. She looked at the cooling evening sky. She thought about the cracked watch and the half-open window in his face when she asked about his family, and the 3 seconds of quiet before he told her he had left a situation. She thought about the cufflink she had found that morning, rolled to the back of the drawer where they kept the spare keys, the kind of object that did not belong in any version of this life. She told herself she would ask him. She told herself she would do it soon. She did not. Not yet. The cufflink had been gold. Not gold-plated, not gold-colored, but the real weight of the thing that told you what it was without needing to be told. There had been an engraved symbol on the face of it that she had not looked at closely enough to read clearly. She had picked it up with the intention of asking him, and then she had set it on the counter, and then he had come into the kitchen, and she had asked him about whether he wanted tea or coffee, and the cufflink had remained on the counter until he left, and she had put it back where she found it. She told herself this was not deception. She told herself this was simply not having the conversation yet. But she was honest enough with herself, in the quiet of her flat in the evenings, to know that there was a difference between waiting for the right moment and choosing not to find it, and she was doing the second thing. What she could not explain, even to herself, was why she was not more concerned. She was a careful person, she was not naive. She had grown up watching her mother assess everything and everyone with the precise, methodical eye of someone who had decided early that trust was a resource you spent sparingly. Some of that had transferred to Nora, not all of it, not the most brittle and defended parts, but enough that she knew herself to be someone who noticed things. She had noticed the cufflink. She had noticed the careful edge in his voice when she asked about his past. She had noticed that for a man who seemed to live lightly, carrying very little, there were occasional small contradictions. The way he ordered wine at a restaurant without looking at the price, which was not an expensive bottle but was not a cheap one either, and ordered it with the ease of someone who had done that 100 times. The way he used certain words sometimes, formal words, words that had a quality that did not entirely match the broken wristwatch and the hand-built bookshelves. She had noticed all of it. And she had continued, because the thing that was real about him, the thing she could not find a contradiction in, was how he was with her. Consistent, unhurried, present in a way that she had not previously had a word for but which she now understood as the opposite of everything she had grown up around. He did not manage her. He did not steer her toward conclusions or arrange situations to produce certain outcomes. He did not, she noticed, ever say or do anything that seemed designed to make her feel that she needed him. He simply showed up and was himself, and made room for her to be herself, and that was it. In a life that had been full of people performing their love as a kind of leverage, that was not nothing. That was, in fact, everything. She lay awake on a Thursday night in late July, and stared at the ceiling of her flat and thought about her father, who had always known which direction was down. And she thought that sometimes you accept a certain amount of mystery because the truth of the person, the real and daily truth of who they are and how they move through the world, is more important than the story of how they got there. And sometimes that is wisdom, and sometimes it is foolishness, and you cannot always tell the difference while you are inside it. She fell asleep still uncertain. And she woke up and she texted him and he came over and they walked to a market, and she bought apples and nothing was resolved and everything continued, and she was, in a way she could not entirely account for, happier than she had been in a very long time. The idea came to her on a Monday morning in August, arriving not as a grand decision, but as a thought so quiet and certain that she almost missed it, the way you almost miss the moment when a season changes. She was sitting on her small balcony with her first cup of tea, watching the street below wake up, the delivery vans and the early commuters, and a woman across the road watering plants on her windowsill with extreme care, and she thought, I could marry him. She held the thought very still, the way you hold a moth in cupped hands to see what it is before you let it go. Not could in the wishful sense, could in the actual, possible, considered sense. They had been together in whatever form this had taken for 4 months. He was not a man she had stopped learning. She did not feel with him that she was managing herself or performing something. She felt with him the thing her father had tried to describe once when she was about 14 and had asked him what love was, genuinely asked it because she wanted to know. He had thought for a moment and then said, "It is the state in which another person makes the world larger, not smaller. You know it because you feel more like yourself when they are nearby, not less." She had not fully understood it at 14. She understood it now. She also understood, and this was the part of the thought that carried its own electricity, that if she married Callum she would be doing 2 things at once. She would be choosing a man she wanted to be with, and she would be telling her mother something without having to say it in words. She would be standing in the middle of her own life and pointing at it and saying, this is mine. She turned the thought over. She was honest with herself about the second part. It was there, it was real. She did not want to hide it or pretend it was nobler than it was. She had been told, implicitly and explicitly her whole life, that her choices were subject to approval. that they needed to be sanctioned by someone with more understanding of how the world worked than she had. And part of wanting to marry Callum, a real and present part, was the desire to make a choice so completely her own that there was no room in it for anyone else's approval. She sat with that. She asked herself whether marrying someone partly to say something to your mother was a bad reason. She decided it was not a reason at all, it was a bonus. The reason was Callum. She called Donna. "I think I am going to ask him to marry me," she said. Donna was quiet for 4 seconds. "I need," Donna said very carefully, "you to say that again." "I think I am going to ask Callum to marry me." "He has been alive for 4 months," Donna said. "I have known him for 4 months," Nora said. "He has presumably been alive longer than that." Nora. "I know. Do you know, because you are talking about marriage and you do not even know his last name. I looked him up, remember. He is not online, he does not exist in any searchable form, and you want to marry him." "I know his name," Nora said. "Callum, and it's not about the name." "What is it about?" Nora looked out at the street, where the woman with the windowsill plants was now back inside, and the delivery vans were gone, and the morning had settled into its ordinary rhythm. "It is about the fact that he is the first person I have ever been with who does not make me feel like I am a project," she said. "Or a prize, or a disappointment. He just is with me, and I just am with him. And I did not know that was possible before, and now I know it is, and I do not want to take 9 more years of small, careful steps toward it." Donna was quiet for a long time. "Okay," she said finally. "Okay, I still think you are moving very fast, but I understand why. And I will not pretend that Gerald Pemberton and his property tax conversations are not part of the picture in some form." "They are," Nora said. "I am not going to claim they aren't." "So what are you going to do?" "I am going to ask him," Nora said. "If he says no, then I will know. If he says yes, then I will know that too." She asked him that Thursday evening. They were in her kitchen, after a day she had spent at work with the specific quiet energy of someone who has made a decision and is simply waiting to act on it. She had not planned a speech. She had not thought about location or timing in any particular way. She had thought about him. He was making tea and she was sitting at her kitchen table and she said, "Callum, I want to ask you something and I want you to hear it properly before you answer it." He turned, he looked at her, he said, "All right." "I want to marry you," she said. "I know this is early by any reasonable measure. I know I don't know everything about you and you don't know everything about me, and there are things we probably haven't said yet that we should. But I know who you are in the ways that I think matter most. And I want to marry you, if you want to marry me." He stood very still for a moment. Not the stillness of a person who has been caught off guard and is trying to recover. The stillness of a person who is being very, very careful to receive something properly, the way you are careful with something real. "Nora," he said. "Don't talk yourself out of it," she said. "Don't tell me it's fast, I know it's fast, that's not what I'm asking." He set the mugs down. He came and sat across from her at the kitchen table, and he looked at her directly, without the small half-closed window she sometimes saw when things moved near to the territory he did not talk about. "There are things about me," he said, "that you don't know, that I haven't told you. And I want to be honest with you about that." "There are things about me you don't know either," she said. "Not like this," he said. She felt something in her chest, a small tightening, not fear exactly but the anticipation of something. "Are you married?" she said. "No." "Have you hurt anyone?" "No," and the speed and sureness of that answer settled the tightening slightly. "Then whatever it is," she said, "it's something we can understand. People have pasts. People have things they carry that are too heavy for a Thursday evening. I am not asking you to give me everything at once. I am asking if you want to be married to me." He looked at her for a long time. "Yes," he said, "I do." And that was it, that was the whole thing. She laughed first. Then he smiled in the way he smiled when something caught him genuinely, which was a smile that started slowly and arrived completely. They sat at her kitchen table with the unmade tea and did not hug immediately or cry or say anything particularly meaningful. They just sat in it for a moment, the way you sit in a space you have just decided to move into, getting the feel of it. She called Donna that night. Donna said, "You are absolutely certain?" Nora said, "Completely." Donna said, "Right, then I am happy for you, and terrified on your behalf, but mostly happy." Nora did not call her mother, not that night. She thought about how to do it, and decided the most honest version was also the bluntest one. She sent a photograph. It was taken the following Saturday, on a walk near the reservoir, not staged or posed, just Nora in her blue coat and Callum in the grey jacket, standing together in the October morning light with the water behind them and a register office appointment already made for 2 weeks hence. She had scrawled one line on the back of a printed copy and put it in an envelope and sent it to her mother's address. "She is married, love, Nora." Present tense. She had written it in present tense because by the time her mother received it, it would be true. The ceremony was on a Friday afternoon in the second week of October. The register office was in Islington. There were 2 witnesses, Donna, wearing a dark green coat, and Owen from the gallery, who had heard about it and been genuinely delighted and asked if he could come, and Nora had said yes. Callum wore a suit that fitted him well, charcoal grey, and she wondered briefly and only briefly where it had come from because it was the kind of suit that was quietly and absolutely right, and then she thought later, I will wonder about that later. She wore a dress she had bought from a shop she liked, ivory, not a wedding dress exactly, just a dress that was right. She carried the flowers she had bought that morning from the petrol station on the corner, because it was on the way and they had a good bunch of white freesias and she liked freesias. They said the words, they meant them. Outside afterward, on the pavement in the October air, Donna hugged her and Owen shook Callum's hand with enormous enthusiasm, and Callum laughed, and Nora stood in the late afternoon light and thought, "This is mine. I made this. This is entirely, completely mine." They had dinner that evening at a restaurant that was neither cheap nor expensive, just good, the 4 of them, and they talked about things that had nothing to do with weddings or mothers or trust funds, and it was the best dinner she could remember in a very long time. Later, much later, after Donna and Owen had gone and she and Callum were in her flat, which was now their flat in all but the practicalities, she sat on the kitchen floor in her ivory dress with her shoes off, and he made toast because neither of them had eaten enough at dinner despite being at a restaurant for 3 hours, and she thought, I have no idea what comes next. And for the first time in her life that felt fine. That felt in fact like exactly the right thing to feel. She picked up her phone. There were 3 missed calls from her mother's number, no voicemail. She turned the phone face down on the kitchen floor beside her. The toast was ready, she ate it. Outside, Islington went on with its Friday night, loud and ordinary and completely unaware that anything had changed. But things had changed. She could feel it, solid and real in the exact center of her chest, the way you feel a decision that is the right one, not exciting, not triumphant, just settled, the way a key settles in a lock it was made for. She thought about her father, she thought about larger, not smaller, she thought, yes. Her mother's calls came 3 more times that weekend, each one going unanswered, each one leaving no voicemail, which was itself a form of communication. Vivienne Ashford did not leave voicemails. Voicemails could be avoided. Voicemails gave the other person time to prepare. When Vivienne wanted to speak to you, she called until you answered. On Sunday afternoon, Nora answered. She was sitting on the small balcony with her second cup of tea of the morning, which had gone cold, because she had been watching a pair of starlings on the television aerial across the road, doing something territorial and interesting. She answered the phone with a calm she had not expected to have, the kind that comes not from bravery, but from having already made the irreversible thing. Nora, her mother said. Mum, Nora said. There was a pause of approximately 2 seconds, which was a long pause for Vivienne, who normally did not leave gaps unless she meant them. You are married, Vivienne said. Yes, Nora said. To the man in the photograph. Yes, his name is Callum. Another pause. I do not know anything about him, Vivienne said. I know quite a lot about him, Nora said. Nora, and this time her mother said her name in a different register, lower, less armored, the way she sometimes said it when they were not fighting, when it was just the 2 of them in a kitchen somewhere and her mother was briefly, partially her actual self. I am not calling to argue. I am calling because you are my daughter and you have done something that will affect the rest of your life and I was not there. Nora sat with that. It was not easy to sit with. She had expected to fight. She had not quite prepared for her mother to be sad. You were not there, Nora said carefully, because you would have tried to stop it. Perhaps, Vivienne said. But I should have been given the chance. You have been trying to give me a chance with Gerald Pemberton for the better part of 8 months, Nora said. I did not want that chance, I made my own one. Vivienne said nothing for a moment. He is not from money, Vivienne said. I can see that from the photograph. No, Nora agreed, he is not. Then you have forfeited the trust. Yes, Nora said, I know. She had thought about this. She had sat with it honestly for the 2 weeks between the conversation in the kitchen and the register office, and she had decided that the trust, the 9 years, the access, the security her father had intended for her, was something she would manage without. She earned money. It was not much money, but it was hers. Callum earned money. It was not much money, but he managed it carefully. They would be all right. She did not know yet exactly how they would be all right, but she believed it, and she had found, over the past several months, that believing something with Callum involved was more reliable than calculating it without him. You have given up a great deal, her mother said, to make a point. I have not made a point, Nora said. I have made a life, there's a difference. Vivienne was quiet for a long time, long enough that Nora looked at her phone to check the call was still connected. I would like to meet him, her mother said finally. Nora was quiet in return. Not yet, she said. Give me some time. How much time? I'll call you, Nora said. I will call you. And that was how the conversation ended. Not with a resolution, not with warmth, but not with a door slammed shut either. Just left open, a fraction, the way certain things need to stay open even when you are not yet ready to walk through them. She stayed on the balcony for a while after. The starlings were gone. The aerial was empty. The morning had gone on without them, as mornings do. When she went back inside, Callum was making breakfast with the focused ease of a man who cooked the way he did most things, without fuss and without ceremony, as if the act itself was enough and did not need to be commented upon. She sat at the kitchen table and watched him and thought, this is the man I married. And then, as she sometimes did in quiet moments, she thought about the cufflink, thought about Donna's words, he does not exist in any searchable form, thought about the 3 seconds of silence before he told her he had left a situation. He handed her a plate of eggs and toast and sat across from her, and she said, my mother called. How is she? He said without irony or edge. Sad, Nora said, which is harder to deal with than angry. Yes, he said, it usually is. She ate, he ate. The flat above the launderette hummed with the distant machinery below, and the pigeons on the sill rearranged themselves for the day. She thought, I chose this man, I chose this flat, I chose this Sunday morning with these eggs and this noise and this life. And somewhere in the back of her mind, very quietly, she also thought, I still do not know everything. But that thought she did not say out loud, not yet. Not because she was afraid of the answer, but because she had learned in the past 4 months that some things arrive in their own time, and forcing them does not make them clearer, it only makes them defensive, and she wanted whatever came when it came to come clearly. The freesias from the register office ceremony were still in a jar on the kitchen windowsill, beginning to turn. She looked at them while she ate her eggs. They were still beautiful in the way of things that are just past their best, still worth keeping, still worth looking at. She thought, all right then. The flat above the launderette in East Finchley had been Callum's for 14 months before it became theirs. This was apparent in various small ways. The way the furniture was arranged to suit one person rather than two, the single hook by the door, the bookshelf that had left no room for additions, the kitchen drawer that contained exactly the utensils required for cooking for one. Within a week they had rearranged it, not dramatically. A second hook went up by the door, 3 of his books shifted to make a shelf for hers. The drawer gained a wooden spoon and a set of measuring cups she had brought from her flat in a tote bag, along with 2 mugs she particularly liked, and a small framed print of a yellow field that her father had given her when she was 22, and that she had moved with her to every flat she had ever lived in. Her flat in Highbury Grove, which she had loved, which she had arranged and painted and lived in for 3 years, she gave up at the end of October. The rent was not manageable on a single gallery salary, and the East Finchley flat, though small, was quiet and orderly and smelled, not unpleasantly, of clean laundry drifting up through the floor in the mornings. She did not mourn the Highbury Grove flat as much as she had expected to. She had thought she would. She had thought walking away from the space she had built for herself would feel like a defeat or a diminishment. Instead, The morning she handed back the keys, she walked out onto the pavement and looked up at the windows of the flat that had been hers and felt cleanly like herself. Like a person who had moved on in the direction they had chosen, which was different from being pushed. Their life together was, objectively speaking, a modest one. She earned a salary at the gallery that covered her share of the rent and her food, and the occasional book or item of clothing, and not a great deal more. Callum's income came from the deliveries for Edna, from 2 days a week at a hardware shop on the high street where the owner, a man named Arthur who wore the same green apron every day and had opinions about everything, paid him in cash, and from odd jobs that came through a quiet network of people in the neighborhood who needed things fixed. He was, she discovered, extraordinarily good with his hands. He could look at a broken thing and understand what was wrong with it. He fixed the radiator that had been making a noise since the first cold evening in November. He rebuilt a shelving unit in the hallway that she had brought from her old flat in pieces and that she had assumed was beyond repair. He rewired a lamp that she had bought at a market, and that turned out, when she got it home, to be missing crucial components. And he had sat at the kitchen table one evening with a small toolkit and fixed it in 40 minutes while she read on the sofa and the radio played. She had grown up around men who paid people to fix things. She had not known, specifically, that watching a person fix a thing with their own hands was something she would find beautiful. He never made her feel that their income was a problem or a weight. He was practical about money in the way that people who have thought carefully about it tend to be. He knew what he had and what he needed, and he organized one around the other without drama. On the days when her end of things was tight, he said nothing and they ate pasta. On the days when Edna paid extra for a particularly large delivery, he came home with a bottle of wine and cooked something better than pasta. She stopped going to the restaurants she had gone to before, the ones where the main course cost what she earned in an afternoon. She did not miss them as much as she had expected to. There was a pleasure in the version of the city they lived in, the market and the hardware shop and the pub 2 streets away where the chairs did not match, and the food was solid and unpretentious, and the landlord, a man named Dennis, knew what they wanted to drink before they ordered. In November, Donna came to dinner for the first time at the East Finchley flat. Donna arrived with wine and the particular careful expression of a person who is about to assess a living situation, without letting the person being assessed know they are being assessed. She stood in the doorway for a moment, taking it in, and then she came inside and sat at the kitchen table while Callum cooked and Nora opened the wine, and they talked about the publishing house and the gallery and a piece of news from Owen about a new artist they had taken on. After dinner, when Callum was washing up and Nora and Donna were sitting with the remains of the wine, Donna leaned over and said quietly, "You look well." "I am well," Nora said. "You look like yourself," Donna said. "More than usual, I mean, more than you have in a long time." Nora thought about this. She thought about the person she had been at the long oak table in her mother's house, eating perfectly poached eggs and calculating the cost of things. She thought about the person she was now, sitting in a small flat that smelled of laundry and cooking, which was entirely imperfect and entirely hers. "Yes," she said, "I think I am." She called her mother once a week. The calls were short and polite and moved carefully around the things they had not yet found a way to say. Vivienne did not mention Gerald Pemberton again. Nora did not invite her to the flat. They lived for a while in a careful middle distance that was not warmth and was not coldness, but was a kind of functional courtesy that they both understood to be temporary. December arrived. The flat was cold in the mornings in a way that the old radiator could only partially address. They slept under an additional duvet that Nora's aunt had given them as a belated wedding gift, a large and luxurious thing entirely out of proportion with the rest of the flat's aesthetic, and Nora loved it for exactly that reason. She had begun to notice in December that Callum had days when he was quieter than usual. Not sad, not withdrawn from her, but thoughtful in a particular way, as though something was sitting at the back of his mind that he was turning over without resolution. She had learned to read the texture of his silences over the months they had been together, and she knew the difference between the silence of a man who was at ease and the silence of a man who was carrying something. She did not ask. She had learned that asking directly sometimes closed the thing you were trying to open. She waited instead, the way you wait for a window to open in weather that is deciding whether to storm. In the second week of December, a letter arrived. She was at work when it came, so she did not see the envelope, only heard about it. He texted her at 11 in the morning with a message that said, "There's a letter here. When you're home tonight, we should probably talk. She held her phone in the gallery office and looked at that message for a long time. The gallery was busy around her with the sounds of a weekday morning, people's shoes on the wooden floor, a conversation near the contemporary prints, the low hum of the climate control system that was always either too much or not enough. She texted back, "All right." She worked until 6 with a layer of awareness underneath everything she did, a low level attending to the thought of the letter, the way you are aware of a sound in another room without being able to make it out. She got home just after 6:30. Callum had made dinner. This was not unusual. What was unusual was the envelope on the table, placed to one side, not hidden, not prominent, just there, the way he had placed it there for when she was ready. She sat down, she looked at it. It was white, high quality, addressed to him at the flat, which meant it had been forwarded from somewhere else. There was no return address. The stamp was domestic. "What is it?" she said. He sat down across from her. "My family solicitor," he said. The word solicitor landed quietly, not alarmingly. It was just a word, but it came with the slight weight of everything she had not yet pressed him about. "What does it say?" she said. "The estate has been through a formal process," he said. "There are decisions that need to be made. My presence has been formally requested." He paused. "It's about the title and the property attached to it." She looked at him. "The title," she said. Not a question. A repetition of the word, the way you repeat something when you are making room for it in your understanding of things. He looked at her steadily. He had the look of a man who has been carrying something heavy for a long time and is putting it down not because he is tired of it, but because he has arrived somewhere safe enough. "My full name," he said, "is Callum Ashwick." She knew the name. She had the sense of knowing it in the way you know a word in a language you do not speak, from somewhere at the edge of your awareness, from some conversation or article half remembered. "Tell me," she said. And he did. He told her about the dukedom that had passed to him when his father died 2 years before. About the estate in Herefordshire, the house, the land, the formal obligations and the equally formal entanglements that came with all of it. He told her about his father, a man who had been complicated and difficult, and who had used the title the way some people use height, to establish themselves above others. He told her about the trust within the estate, different from Nora's trust, larger, older, that had required a formal decision from Callum about whether he was taking the title on or ceding it. He had run from it. That was what he said, and he said it plainly without dressing it up. He had handed his phone to an assistant, shed every visible marker of his previous life, come to London with a small bag and a decision to live as himself rather than as the person the title made him. "I wanted to know who I was without it," he said. "I didn't know who that was. I had been the heir and then the duke, and I had never once just been Callum." She sat across from him at the kitchen table where they had eaten 100 dinners and made 100 cups of tea. She thought about the cufflink under the drawer, the 3-second silence, the wine ordered without looking at the price, the formal words that occasionally surfaced in an otherwise ordinary sentence. "I found a cufflink," she said, "months ago." "I know," he said. "I found it on the counter. I put it back." "I should have said something then." "Yes," she said, "you should have." They sat with that. Outside the window, East Finchley went about its evening. A bus, a dog, the particular quiet of a residential street on a cold December night that has not yet decided whether to snow. "What does the letter want you to do?" she said. "Decide," he said. "Accept the title formally or cede it formally. It's been 2 years of limbo. The estate needs clarity." She looked at the envelope on the table, then she looked at him. "And what do you want to do?" she said. He said, "I don't know. That is the honest answer. I've spent 2 years being certain I wanted nothing to do with it, and now I'm sitting here with you in this flat, and I'm less certain than I've ever been, because everything is different now." She thought, everything is different now. "What changed?" she said, although she thought she knew. "You," he said, "knowing you, the way you made a decision from the inside rather than the outside, marrying me without knowing what I was or wasn't. It made me think about what it would mean to make my own decision from the inside, whatever that is." The radiator knocked twice, its small habitual complaint. Nora picked up the envelope and turned it over in her hands. "We'll figure it out," she said. Not a solution, not a plan, just the steadiest thing she knew how to say. She did not sleep well that night, but not for the reasons she might have expected. She lay in the dark under the large duvet and listened to Callum breathing beside her and thought not about betrayal, not about anger, but about the extraordinary strangeness of the human decision. The things people walk away from, the things they walk toward without knowing why. The fact that a person could carry an entire estate, a title, generations of history, and bring it into a small flat above a launderette and leave it, folded in the space under a kitchen drawer for 14 months. She thought about her mother, who had spent her life acquiring certainty, building walls against unpredictability, engineering a life so orderly that nothing surprising could find its way in. She thought about the cost of that. She thought about the long oak table and the triangular toast and the pale gray eyes. She thought about her father who had said, "The world gets larger." She turned the name over in her mind, Callum Ashwick, the 14th Duke of Hereford. It sounded like a character from a novel. It sounded like something from the world she had deliberately stepped sideways out of when she walked out of her mother's house in March with her coat on, and her decision made, and the spring morning in front of her. And here it was, having followed her sideways through her own life and ended up at the kitchen table under a white envelope. She was not angry. She was aware of this and examined it carefully and found it was true. She was not angry. She was something more complicated, a feeling she did not have a word for, which was something like, "I thought I chose one thing and I chose another thing and I did not know it, and both things are true at the same time, and now I have to decide what to do with that." She fell asleep sometime after midnight. In the morning, Callum made porridge and did not try to have the conversation again over breakfast, which was exactly right, and she loved him for knowing it. She called Donna from the pavement outside the gallery during her lunch break. "I need you to sit down," she said. "I am sitting down," Donna said. "I work in publishing, I am always sitting down." "His name is Callum Ashwick," Nora said. "He is the 14th Duke of Hereford. He has been in hiding from his own title, in a flat above a launderette in East Finchley for the past year and a half." There was a silence long enough that Nora counted 11 people walking past her on the pavement. "I've said Donna need a minute." "Take two," said Nora. "A duke," Donna said. "A duke? In a flat above a launderette?" "Yes, with a cracked watch." "He bought the cracked watch," Nora said. "At a market stall. I think he rather liked that it was cracked." Donna breathed out very slowly. "And how do you feel?" Nora looked at the street. At the ordinary mid-December London afternoon, the grey sky, the Christmas lights on the shop fronts, the person selling roasted chestnuts from a cart at the corner who was wearing a hat shaped like a reindeer. "Strange," she said, "and fine both at once, which is probably not the reaction anyone would expect." "It is absolutely the reaction I would expect from you," Donna said. "But Nora, does your mother know?" Nora had not yet thought about her mother in the context of this new information. She thought about it now, standing on the pavement in December, and the thought produced an emotion so complex it almost had a sense of humor. "No," she said, "not yet." "When she finds out," Donna said slowly, "she is going to have a very specific kind of reaction." "I know," Nora said. "She is going to have the reaction of a woman who told her daughter not to marry a pauper, only to discover the pauper was a duke the whole time." "I know," Nora said again. There was another pause. "How do you feel about that?" Donna said. Nora thought about it honestly. "Complicated," she said, "because part of me finds it very funny, and part of me wishes it weren't a factor at all. I did not marry him because of anything except him. And now there is this other thing, and people will say I knew or I planned it or it was the point all along." "People who say that don't know you," Donna said, "and anyway you didn't know." "No," Nora said, "I really didn't." The chestnut seller's reindeer hat shifted in the wind. "So what happens now?" Donna said. "He has to make a decision about the title," Nora said, "and I have to figure out how to be someone who is married to a man who is also potentially a duke, in that order." She went back inside to work. She spent the afternoon helping a woman choose a print for her daughter's bedroom, and the conversation was warm and easy and entirely about art, and she was grateful for it, for the simple, ordinary fact of it, for being able to stand in a gallery and talk about light and color while the rest of her life rearranged itself quietly around a white envelope on a kitchen table. She came home at 6 and they ate the leftovers from the night before and they talked about other things. And when she went to sleep that night she fell asleep more easily, because the first night is always the hardest, and she had already done it. January came in cold and dry, the kind of January that feels like the year has not quite decided to start yet, still clearing its throat, still waiting for the courage to commit. Nora noticed things about Callum in January that she had not noticed before, or rather, things she had noticed and had not known how to name, and now she had the name and so the noticing changed shape. The way he read fast and widely, and the things he retained were specific and particular, not the broad, famous facts of things but the detailed inner workings, the how it operates of whatever the subject was. He could talk about the conservation of a historic building, or the mechanics of an agricultural tenancy, or the legal framework of land ownership, with a fluency that could not come from casual interest. It came from having needed to know these things, from having been at some point responsible for them. She noticed the way he handled money, not the fact of having little of it, but the ease with which he managed it. He was not worried about money the way people who have grown up without it are worried about it. He was practical about it in the way someone is practical about a tool they have used in different forms at different scales, and understand to be a tool and not a measure of anything important. She noticed the way certain people recognized him. This had happened twice that she could think of now, with the knowledge she had looking back. A man at the pub had done a double-take over Dennis's shoulder and then looked away very quickly. A woman at the market in November had stared for a full 3 seconds and then turned to the person with her and said something brief and private. Nora had not thought much of these moments at the time. She thought about them now. She did not interrogate the past to make it smaller. She looked at it with the understanding she had now, and it did not change anything essential. It added texture. It added information. It did not change the man at the table making porridge. But there were things she needed to know, and she knew it, and in January she started asking them. Not all at once, not as an interrogation, but in the way that people in honest marriages ask things, one question at a time, following where it goes, leaving room for it to be complicated. She asked about the estate. He told her it was in Herefordshire, which she had known vaguely as a county rolling hills, older than most things, the kind of English countryside that appears in paintings as though it has always looked exactly like this and always will. The house was Georgian, he said, large without being excessive, the kind of house that had been built to last several centuries and had, in fact, lasted several centuries, and now required the kinds of maintenance decisions that several centuries of occupancy produce. How large, she said. He told her. The number of rooms was a number she had to sit with for a moment. And the land, she said. He told her that too. Farmland, woodland, several tenanted properties occupied by farming families who had, in some cases, been on the land for generations. She thought about the flat above the laundrette. She thought about the 40 minutes he spent rebuilding a shelf. You built the bookshelves yourself, she said, when you have a house with how many rooms? 46, he said, not counting storage. And you built shelves. I wanted to know I could, he said. That was the whole of it. I wanted to know I could make something with my hands because the whole of my previous life was built on the work of other hands, and I had never used my own. She thought about this. She thought about it for the rest of the day. She thought about who she had married, and she kept arriving at the same answer, which was, the same person. The same man who had carried crates in a farmer's market and fixed a radiator and made porridge and sat beside her on a Tuesday evening when she cried without knowing why. The title was a fact about him the way her mother was a fact about her, real, significant, formative, but not the whole of what either of them were. Still, there were complications. In January, the complications began to arrive with the regularity of the post. The solicitor wrote again. There were estate matters that could not wait indefinitely. A property on the eastern edge of the estate required a decision about tenancy renewal. A legal question regarding the formal ownership of a portion of woodland had been pending for 9 months, and the other party was losing patience. There were apparently staff at the house, a small team who managed the property in Callum's absence, who had been operating under provisional arrangements for 2 years and needed clarity about their positions. He read these letters at the kitchen table, and she sometimes sat across from him and watched him read them, and she could see, in the set of his face, the thing she had seen in him from the beginning, the man who was trying to understand what the right thing was and do it without making it about how it would look. "You are going to have to go back," she said one evening in the third week of January, when the letter about the tenancy renewal had arrived and was sitting on the table between them. He looked up. "Yes," he said. "When?" she said. "Soon," he said. "I've been putting it off. I shouldn't keep putting it off." "No," she said, "you shouldn't." He put the letter down. "Come with me." She had not expected him to ask. She thought, for reasons she could not entirely account for, that this was something he might want to do alone, the way the earlier part of his running away had been alone. "Are you sure?" she said. "Yes," he said. "I don't want to walk back into it without you beside me, not because I need you to handle it, because I want you there. That's the whole reason." She thought about it. "I'll need a few days," she said, "to sort things at the gallery." "Take the time you need," he said. She talked to her supervisor the next day. The gallery gave her 4 days of personal leave with minimal pushback, which she thought was generous and which Owen, who she told only that she was going to the country for a few days, seemed extremely pleased about on her behalf for reasons he did not fully articulate. They drove to Herefordshire on a Thursday morning in late January. She had never been to Herefordshire. She had thought of it, when she thought of it at all, as one of those counties that English people name when they are describing somewhere quiet, somewhere with fields and old churches and a pace of life that is not the city's pace. She had thought of it as background, as scenery, as the kind of place you move away from. She had not thought of it as somewhere that would come to her. The drive took 2 hours and 40 minutes. They left East Finchley before 8 and the city gradually released them, motorway to A Road to B Road, the sprawl of outer London giving way to towns, towns giving way to villages, villages giving way to the wide open particular green and grey of an English winter countryside that was, she had to admit, genuinely beautiful. She did not say anything as they drove. She was looking. Callum drove with both hands on the wheel, and he did not force conversation, which was one of the things she loved about him, that he understood when looking needed to happen in its own time. They turned off the B Road onto a lane, and the lane went between hedgerows and over a small stone bridge above a stream, and then it widened, and then she saw it. She had not known what to expect. She had thought big house, Georgian like he said, old. She had thought she would feel something awkward and exterior, the way you feel when you enter a museum after hours, aware that the space is not meant for you. She did not feel that. She felt unexpectedly that it was a real place, not a monument, a house. A large, old, weathered, complicated house that had been lived in by people for a very long time, and that bore their evidence in the way old things do, in the worn stone of the front steps, in the ivy that someone had cut back at some point and let grow again, in the windows that were not all the same age as the walls around them. He stopped the car in front of it and turned off the engine. They sat for a moment. "Well," she said. "Yes," he said. 46 rooms, she said. "Yes," he said. "We have 4 days, she said. "We do. I'd like to see all of them," she said. He turned to look at her, and the expression on his face was something she had not seen on him before. Not relief exactly, something closer to the feeling of being known. "We'll start with the kitchen," he said. "The kitchen is the best room." They got out of the car and went inside. The housekeeper was a woman named Patricia, who had been with the estate for 22 years, and who met them at the door with the professional warmth of someone who had learned that the most important skill in her role was never letting anything show on her face. She shook Nora's hand with a firm, measured grip, and said she was very pleased to meet her, and Nora believed her. The kitchen was, as promised, the best room. It was enormous and warm, with a flagstone floor worn smooth, and a long wooden table in the center that looked as though it had hosted 1,000 breakfasts and several important arguments. There was an old range on one wall and a newer oven beside it, and a window above the sink that looked onto the kitchen garden, currently asleep under the January gray. She sat at the long table and Patricia made tea and Callum sat across from her, in this house that was his, in this room that had been his grandmother's kitchen and his father's kitchen, and was now also hers, and they drank the tea and she thought, "I made a defiant, reckless, wonderful choice. And here it is." The 4 days in Herefordshire turned out to be 4 days of a different kind of knowledge. She had thought, going in, that she would feel like a visitor, that the scale of the house and the land and the quiet authority of a place that had been standing for 3 centuries would make her feel small, that the 46 rooms would press down on her in some way, would make the small flat above the laundrette feel like an embarrassment or a mistake. None of that happened. What happened instead was that she walked through room after room and found herself interested, not intimidated, interested in the way she was interested in paintings, in the way she was interested in anything that contained layers of time and decision and human need. Every room in the house was a record of someone's life, someone's taste, someone's careful or careless or hopeful addition to a place that would outlast them. There were rooms that had been furnished in the 1800s and not significantly altered since. There were rooms that had been stripped back to nothing and never refurnished, which told their own story. There was a small sitting room on the first floor that had clearly been someone's favorite room, worn in the specific way of a room that has been loved, the arm of the chair smoothed by 100 resting hands, the window overlooking the garden dirtied slightly by 100 faces pressed close to it. She asked Patricia about the rooms she found herself in. Patricia knew their histories with the ease of someone who has spent 2 decades learning a place by heart. She told Nora about the original family, the various branches and marriages and inheritances, the century when the house had been used as a convalescent home, and the particular marks that had left on certain rooms, the decade when the south wing had been shut up entirely because of a broken boiler that nobody for a long time had the money to fix. And that room, Nora said on the second day, pointing to the small sitting room with the worn chair arm, who used that? His grandmother, Patricia said, and said it with a gentleness that told Nora the grandmother had been important here, had been loved by the people who worked in this house. She walked the grounds on the 3rd day with Callum, in the January cold, along the edges of the fields that were brown and bare, and would not be anything else for months, and she listened while he talked about the farming tenancies and the woodland management, and the questions the solicitor needed answers to. She listened not to have opinions, not to help make decisions, but because she wanted to understand what this place was to him, what it was asking of him, and what it would mean for him to choose to carry it again. He had loved it, she thought. Underneath the running, underneath the 2 years of deliberate distance, he had loved it. You could hear it in the way he talked about the stream that ran along the northern boundary, and the breed of cattle that the farming family in the East Field had kept for 3 generations, and the way the house looked at dusk from the lane, which he described exactly once and then stopped, because he had gone somewhere inside himself briefly before coming back. You missed it, she said, on the 3rd evening, sitting by the fire in the large sitting room that Patricia had opened for them. Yes, he said, I did. Why did you leave? He was quiet. The fire was the comfortable kind, well-established, not needing to be tended. My father, he said, believed that the title was the whole of me, not in a cruel way, in a way that seemed to him perfectly sensible. I was the heir, and so I was shaped for that purpose, and everything else was peripheral. My preferences, my friendships, the things I found funny or interesting or worth spending time on, all of that was secondary to what I was going to become. He was not wrong that I was going to become it. He was wrong about whether the rest of me existed. She looked at the fire. When he died, he continued, I had 6 months of trying to be the Duke and only the Duke, the way he had always expected me to be, and at the end of 6 months I understood that I had no idea who I was without the expectation. I had spent 32 years being shaped for a role, and I had never once just existed. And so you left, she said. And so I left, he said. With a bag and a cracked watch I bought at a market in Hertfordshire on the way to the train, because I wanted something that was mine by choice rather than by inheritance. She thought about that watch. She thought about the morning at the farmer's market, the cracked screen and the easy way he had moved in the confusion of spilled apples. She thought about the quality of his choosing, not random, not impulsive, but deep and considered in the way of someone who had thought very carefully about what they were doing and was willing to do it plainly. And now, she said, do you know who you are without it? He looked at her. Yes, he said, I've known for about 5 months. She understood what he meant. She did not make it larger or smaller than it was, she just held it. On the 4th day, the solicitor came. His name was Norman Whitfield, a slight man of about 60 with reading glasses that he kept putting on and taking off in a way that seemed to be a nervous habit rather than a visual necessity. He sat at the long kitchen table with a leather folder full of documents, and went through the outstanding matters with Callum in the methodical way of a man who had been waiting patiently for a very long time, and was not going to rush now that the moment had arrived. Nora made tea. She was not required to be in the meeting, but Callum had asked her to stay, and she stayed, sitting at the far end of the table with her mug, not looking at the documents, not trying to follow the technical language, but present in the way he had asked her to be present. She watched his face. She watched him receive the information and respond to it, and she saw something she had not quite seen before in him, the authority. Not the showing of it, not the performance of it, but the thing itself, quiet and unhurried, the way a person handles the weight of something they know how to carry because they were built for it, whatever they might think about whether they wanted to be. He was competent, not in the small, ordinary ways she had watched him be competent in the flat, the radiator, the shelves, the broken lamp, competent in the large, serious, real consequence way. He asked good questions. He made decisions where decisions were needed. He asked for time on the ones that needed thought and stated clearly what time he required. Norman Whitfield left 3 hours later with a set of signed documents and the particular relief of a professional who has been carrying someone else's unresolved problem and can now set it down. Callum sat at the kitchen table after he left. He put both hands flat on the surface, as though he was feeling the temperature of it. "Well," she said from the kettle. "Well," he said. "You're staying with it," she said, not a question. She had watched the meeting. "Yes," he said. "Good," she said. He looked up. "Good. It's yours," she said. "It is a real thing that belongs to your life, and walking away from it a second time would not make you more yourself. It would just be a different kind of avoidance." He was quiet for a moment. "We would have to split time," he said. "The flat and here." "I know," she said. "The gallery might not be easy to manage from here." "I know," she said. "Nora," he said her name in the steady way he said it when he wanted her to hear something important. "I am not asking you to give up your life. I am trying to figure out how to combine them." "I know that too," she said, "and I appreciate it." She set the mugs down and sat across from him. "We figure it out. We don't solve it today. We figure it out as we go." He looked at her for a moment. "Do you know," he said, "that you are the most practically brave person I have ever met?" She thought about that. "I am not sure practically brave is a compliment," she said. "It is the best one I know," he said. The kitchen was warm. The grounds outside the window were bare and gray and would be for another 2 months before the first tentative thing appeared, and then the next, and then gradually, the way it always went, spring would arrive and the fields would be green and the kitchen garden would be working again, and the whole place would be different from this cold January version of itself. She thought about all of it, the flat above the launderette, the 46 rooms, the frayed collar on the shirt he ironed himself, Patricia and the worn arm on the chair in the small sitting room, her mother's pale gray eyes, Donna saying, "He looks at you like you are interesting," the freesias from the petrol station still on the windowsill in her memory just beginning to turn. She thought about the word marriage, what it actually contained when you stripped the ceremony from it, when you stripped the expectation and the performance and the social fact of it, when you got to the actual living material of it, the daily and the difficult and the ordinary and the real. It was this is what it was. She picked up her tea. "Right," she said, "show me the garden." The invitation arrived in February on a Tuesday morning, in an envelope so stiff and cream-colored that it felt like a statement. Nora was the one who picked it up from the mat. She turned it over. The address was handwritten in the kind of penmanship that is taught and practiced and maintained, the kind that belongs to a generation that viewed legibility as a form of respect. It was addressed to Lord and Lady Ashwick. She stood in the hallway of the East Finchley flat for a moment, looking at those words. Lord and Lady Ashwick. She had not, and this was something she had not quite confronted yet, fully processed what she now was, formally, in the eyes of the world that used those words. She was Nora Ashford, who worked in a gallery, who had grown up watching her mother calculate the value of everything, who had bought freesias from a petrol station for her wedding because they were on the way and she liked them. She was also, apparently, Lady Ashwick. These were the same person. That was the extraordinary and slightly absurd fact of it. She put the envelope on the kitchen table and made tea, and when Callum came through, still in the process of becoming awake in the slow and unhurried way he had, she pointed to it. He looked at the envelope without touching it for a moment, The way you look at something you have been expecting but are still not entirely prepared for. The Pemberton dinner, he said. He had seen the return address, the estate crest on the back of the envelope, small and formal. Your mother's name is on the guest list, Nora said. He looked up. You haven't opened it. I can tell, she said. He picked it up, he opened it, he read it. The Pemberton family were hosting a dinner in March, formal country estate, the kind of event that existed in a particular social world that Nora had grown up adjacent to, but never quite inside. A world of estates and titles and families who had been in a room together for so long that the room had shaped itself around them. Gerald Pemberton, she said. Yes, said Callum. She picked up her tea. She looked at the kitchen window. Outside, February was being February, grey and damp, and committed to it. She did this deliberately, Nora said. Callum sat down. Probably not deliberately, he said. More likely someone told someone. These things circulate. The news that I had formally accepted the title and was married, that would have moved through certain circles very quickly. And your name was on an invitation list. I've been on the Pemberton guest list since I was 6 years old, he said. My father and Gerald's father were at school together. It's a standing invitation. She thought about this, about the geometry of the world she had married into, the lines of connection that ran between these families like old roads, worn deep by generations of use, still there even when nobody was looking at them. We don't have to go, he said. She turned and looked at him. Of course we're going, she said. He raised an eyebrow. Your mother will be there, she said. Mine will probably find out. And I would rather meet that situation directly than wonder about it from the other side of London. He looked at her with the expression she had come to recognize as the one where he was slightly in awe of her, and also understood her perfectly. Are you sure, he said. I am absolutely not sure, she said, but I am going. She called Donna that afternoon. The Pemberton dinner, she said and explained. Donna was quiet for 6 seconds. This was a long Donna silence. You are going to walk into a country estate dinner attended by your mother, Donna said, where you will presumably be introduced as Lady Ashwick. Your mother's preferred match for you will also be present, and the man you chose over the preferred match will be revealed to have been a duke the entire time. Yes, Nora said. Nora, I know. This is the kind of thing that happens in novels, 19th century novels. I am aware, Nora said. Are you ready for this? Nora thought about March, the dinner, the room full of people who had known Callum as Callum Ashwick and had been politely bewildered by his disappearance, and were now, presumably, extremely curious about his return and his wife. She thought about her mother's face, about the particular quality of Vivienne Ashford's composure when confronted with something she had not anticipated and could not, in the moment, correct. I think so, she said. I think I've been getting ready for it for a year without knowing it. March came. The dinner was on a Saturday. She spent more time than she usually spent thinking about what to wear, and then she spent some time being annoyed at herself for spending more time than usual, and then she decided that dressing for this occasion was a reasonable thing to take seriously, and she stopped being annoyed about it. She wore a dark green dress she had bought for herself the previous autumn, before any of this, before Herefordshire and the solicitor and the cream-colored envelope. It was well made and simple, and she had bought it because she liked the color against her complexion, and she had worn it once to a gallery opening. She wore her hair the way she normally wore her hair. She put on earrings that had been her grandmother's, small gold things, nothing significant to anyone but her. She looked at herself in the mirror of the flat in East Finchley and she thought, this is who I am. This is the person who will walk into that room. Callum in the doorway said, you look exactly right. She said, you look like a duke. He had worn the charcoal grey suit, the same one from the register office, and it had the same quality it had had then, quietly, absolutely right, the kind of suit worn by a person who knows what he is doing without needing to announce it. They drove to the Pemberton estate in Wiltshire and arrived at 7 in the evening, and the gravel was lit, and the house was warm in the windows, and there were other cars and the sound of people inside, the human sound of a gathering, which is at once welcoming and slightly threatening in the way of all gatherings. She walked in beside him and the room was full of people, and the first thing she noticed was the quality of the noticing. The way people saw him, not all at once, not in a wave, but progressively as recognition moved through the space. A double take near the fireplace, a woman mid-sentence who stopped and restarted, two men near the window who turned and exchanged a look that was not quite surprise because they had been told he was coming, but was something adjacent. And then people saw her, and a different quality of attention followed, the measuring kind, the curious kind, the kind that in this particular social world meant, who is this person, what is her history, how does she fit, and what do we think about it? She held it, she stood beside her husband in the large warm room, and she held it. Gerald Pemberton found them within 15 minutes. He was tall and affable and clearly relieved to have a socially acceptable thing to do, which was to shake Callum's hand and welcome them, and he did this with a warmth that Nora found, to her slight surprise, genuine. He turned to her and said, "You must be Nora. I've heard a great deal. I've heard some things about you as well," she said, because it was true and because there was no version of pretending it was not. He smiled at that. He had the ability, she noticed, to find a thing funny without making it a joke, and she revised her opinion of him slightly upward from where it had been. They talked for a few minutes, not about anything significant, the easy conversational passing of the early part of an evening, and then he moved on, and a number of other people came to Callum, and she stood beside him and met them, name after name, face after face, and she was calm in the way she had not entirely expected to be calm. She found her mother at 9:15. Or rather, her mother found her. She was standing near the large bookcase in the library off the main room, holding a glass of wine she had been making last for the past hour, looking at the spines of the books, when she heard the particular precise click of her mother's heels on the wooden floor and turned. Vivienne Ashford was wearing midnight blue, her hair was pinned, her posture was the same posture it had always been, her pale grey eyes were exactly the same. They looked at each other. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Nora had rehearsed this in her mind in a general and unavoidable way over the preceding weeks. She had thought about how to begin. She had thought about anger and apology and the various forms that this conversation might take. She had thought about the words she would say. She had not thought that when the moment came, she would simply look at her mother and feel something uncomplicated and immediate that was unmistakably love. Not the easy kind, not the kind that doesn't hurt. The kind that has been through things and is still there, which is the only kind that means anything. "Mum," she said. "Nora," her mother said. Vivienne looked at her for a long moment. Then she looked past her to where Callum was visible through the doorway, in conversation near the fireplace, easy in the room with the particular ease of a man who had been born into this world and had chosen to return to it. "He is," Vivienne said slowly, "Callum Ashwick." "Yes," Nora said. "The Duke of Hereford." "Yes." Vivienne was very still. Then she said, "And you did not know?" It was not a question. "No," Nora said, "I found out in December." "You married him without knowing?" "I married him because of who he was," Nora said. "The rest of it came after." Her mother looked at her. She looked at her with the pale grey eyes that Nora had inherited, and she looked at her for a very long time. And Nora stood in the borrowed light of the Pemberton Library, and she did not explain herself further, because she had said the true thing, and the true thing was enough. "Come and have dinner," her mother said finally. "You are at my table." They went and had dinner. The dinner table sat 18, and Nora was placed next to a man named Geoffrey who was something in the civil service, which he described at unhelpful length but without malice, and across from a woman named Celia who collected antique botanical prints and asked Nora about the gallery with the specific interest of a person who has spent a great deal of time in galleries and genuinely wanted to discuss what she found there. Nora found herself, unexpectedly, having an absorbing conversation about the difference between botanical illustration and botanical art, which was a distinction she had a strong view on, and which Celia also had a strong view on, and they found, pleasingly, that their strong views were different from each other in ways that were interesting rather than frustrating. She was 3 courses in before she was fully aware of how she felt, and then she realized. Fine. She felt fine, more than fine. She felt, sitting in this large dining room in a Wiltshire estate surrounded by people she had never met in a social world she had been told she needed to marry into in order to access like herself. She stole a look at Callum, who was seated further down the table and who at that exact moment was saying something that made the woman beside him laugh. Not the polite laugh of a dinner table, but the real kind, sudden and involuntary and delighted. He glanced up and found Nora's eyes across the table, and something passed between them that was small and private and needed no words. She looked away and went back to Celia and the botanical prince. After dinner, when the table had rearranged itself into the smaller groupings that happen at the end of long evenings, she found her mother again. They stood near the window of the main reception room with their coffee cups, and the particular quiet that can sometimes exist between two people who have a great deal to say and are choosing the one thing. He came back, Vivienne said, not to his title, she meant to himself. Yes, Nora said. And you had something to do with that. Nora thought about this carefully. I don't think I can take the credit. I think he was already most of the way there. I was just present. You were what he came back to, Vivienne said, and this was not from Vivienne a small thing. Vivienne did not hand out significance casually. It cost her something, and Nora received it as such. Yes, she said, I think so. Her mother held her coffee cup in both hands, the way she held things when she was thinking rather than performing. Her face had a quality Nora had not often seen on it, not soft exactly, more like a wall that has been built for so long it has started, almost imperceptibly, to settle. I want to come to the flat, Vivienne said. I want to see where you live. Nora looked at her. All right, she said. Not to inspect it, Vivienne said, and said it precisely, as though she knew how it would sound and was cutting it off. Just to see it, to see where my daughter lives. I know, Nora said, I know that's what you mean. Vivienne looked at her steadily for a moment. You have always been more generous than I deserve, she said. It was the most her mother had ever said, and possibly the most honest. Nora felt something shift in her chest, not a breaking of something, a settling, the way a house settles over time into the ground beneath it. Come for lunch on a Sunday, Nora said. Callum makes a very good soup. Her mother almost smiled. It was not quite a smile, but it was the shape of one, the beginning of it. That would be nice, Vivienne said. They drove back to East Finchley at midnight. The motorway was quiet, the way it is in the middle of the night when the daytime world has let go of its urgency and the roads feel like they belong to no one in particular. Nora sat in the passenger seat and watched the dark countryside slide past and thought about the dinner in its totality, all its parts, the stiff cream envelope and the green dress and Geoffrey from the civil service and Celia's botanical prints and Gerald Pemberton's genuine laugh, and the moment in the library when she had looked at her mother and felt something uncomplicated through all the complication. How was it? Callum said. Better than I expected, she said, in most respects. Your mother. We're having lunch, she said. A Sunday, she wants to see the flat. He was quiet for a moment. Are you sure about that? He said. No, she said, but I think it is the right thing, not because she deserves an immediate return to access. Because she is my mother, and we are the only ones who can decide what the next part of this looks like, and I would rather do it than not do it. He nodded. She watched the dark road. The room tonight, she said, when we walked in, the way people looked at you. Yes, he said, it was an acknowledgement rather than an agreement. It will be like that sometimes, she said, for a while. Yes, he said. You handled it well, she said. I grew up in it, he said. I know what it is. I didn't grow up in it, she said, and I handled it well too. He glanced at her briefly. Yes, he said, you absolutely did. She turned back to the road. Do you know what I was thinking during most of the dinner? She said. Tell me. I was thinking about the carrot and coriander soup, she said. Edna's. I was thinking that nothing at that dinner tonight was as good as that soup and that I would quite like some of it right now. He laughed. It was the laugh she liked best, the real one, the one that started slowly and arrived completely. I'll call her tomorrow, he said. She'll be pleased. She's a compelling person, Nora said. She is, he said. She always has been. They drove the rest of the way in the comfortable quiet of two people who have nothing left to explain to each other for the moment, which is the best kind of quiet there is. The motorway gave way to A roads, and then to the residential streets of North London, and then to their street, and the flat, and the launderette below that was dark and closed at this hour but would be open and chugging away by 6 in the morning. She got out of the car and looked up at the windows of their flat and thought about everything the evening had contained, the weight of it and the lightness of it together, and she thought that this was what it was to be alive inside a life you had actually chosen, all of it at once, the complicated and the simple, the expected and the surprising, none of it clean, all of it yours. She went upstairs, Callum locked the car and followed. The flat was exactly the same as they had left it 6 hours ago, which was the ordinary and marvelous thing about flats. She put the kettle on. He sat at the kitchen table. Outside, East Finchley was asleep, or mostly asleep, the city's version of sleep which is only ever a reduction and not a stopping. The launderette hummed below, the night cycle that someone had set running before they left. She made tea, she put his mug in front of him. She sat across from him and they drank it, and she thought about nothing in particular and everything at once, the way you do at the end of a day that has contained more than most. "Thank you for coming with me," he said, "to the dinner and to Herefordshire and to all of it." She looked at him. "You don't have to thank me," she said. "I'm here." She meant it simply and completely, and he received it that way. The mug was warm in her hands. Spring arrived exactly when it was supposed to and did not announce itself with drama. It was just there one morning, in a different quality of light through the kitchen window, something in the temperature of the air that had not been there the day before. Nora noticed it at 6:15, standing at the kettle in the flat, while Callum was still asleep, and she thought, there it is. March had brought the Pemberton dinner and the conversation with her mother and the beginning of something between them that was not yet friendship and was no longer war, but was a careful and genuine effort that both of them were making, which was more than it had been. Vivienne had come for Sunday lunch as agreed. She had sat at the kitchen table in the small flat above the launderette and eaten the soup that Callum made, not the carrot and coriander, which was Edna's and not to be reproduced, but a lentil and vegetable that was good and warm and uncomplicated, and she had been not warm exactly but present, there without armor or with less of it. She had looked at the framed print of the yellow field on the kitchen wall, the one Nora's father had given her, and she had not said anything about it, but she had looked at it for a long moment with an expression that was entirely private, and then she had looked away. April brought decisions. The estate in Herefordshire needed Callum's attention in a way that could not be managed entirely from East Finchley. The tenancy renewals required visits. There were conservation assessments to commission, structural questions about the north wing that required him to be on site, decisions about the kitchen garden's management that Patricia had been waiting on for 2 years, with the long patience of someone who has learned that the authority she is waiting for will come when it comes. He went down for 4 days in the second week of April. She did not go with him this time. She stayed in London and worked at the gallery and met Donna for dinner and tried to understand, from the inside, what it felt like to have a life that was split across 2 places. It felt, she discovered, like a logistics problem with emotional weight, which was, she suspected, how most of adult life felt when you looked at it directly. She talked to him every evening. He called from the kitchen at Herefordshire, usually after Patricia had left for the day, and the background sounds were different from the flat sounds, quieter, larger, a different quality of silence behind his voice. She listened to the difference and thought about the choices people make and what they cost and what they give. He came back on a Friday afternoon and she was at work when he arrived, and when she came home the flat smelled of something cooking, and he was at the stove, and there was a jar of wildflowers on the table that he had clearly picked from somewhere on the drive back and stuffed into the only container he had to hand, which was a jam jar, and the effect was ridiculous and perfect. "What are those?" she said. "The verge on the lane was full of them," he said. "I stopped the car." She sat down and looked at the wildflowers in the jam jar. "Tell me about the week," she said. He told her about the structural survey of the North Wing, which had produced both good news and expensive news in roughly equal measure. About the conversation with the farming family about the tenancy, which had gone well, the father of the family being a man named Hugh who had shaken Callum's hand for a long time and said he was glad to see the house occupied again. About the kitchen garden, which Patricia had walked him around with the energy of someone showing you something they have been tending in your absence and are proud of, the early vegetables just beginning, the beds turned and ready. "She has been running that garden herself for 2 years, Callum said. She should be paid considerably more." "Then pay her considerably more," Nora said. "I am going to," he said, "as soon as the financial picture is clearer." He paused. "The estate is not in crisis, but it is not as well supported as it should be." There were some decisions in the last few years of my father's tenure that created complexity. She listened, she asked questions where she had them. She did not try to solve anything just to understand. After dinner, she told him about her week, about the gallery where a new exhibition was coming in, and she had spent 3 days working on the installation layout and the accompanying text, which was her favorite part, the quiet intellectual work of finding the right words for the right paintings. About Donna, who had news from the publishing house that was good news for her career, and which Nora described in detail because Callum liked Donna and genuinely cared how her life was going. About Owen, who had announced at work that he was moving in with his partner, and who had delivered this news with the baffled delight of someone who still cannot quite believe it, and whom Nora had hugged in the back office while he looked slightly overwhelmed. Callum smiled at the Owen part. "He's a good person," he said. "He really is," she said. May arrived, and with it, a conversation she had been half expecting and half avoiding. It came on a Sunday morning when she was running. This was her Tuesday and Thursday habit, but she had missed Thursday, which was Callum's Herefordshire week, and she had rescheduled to Sunday, and she was on her usual route around the park when it simply arrived, the thought clear and unhurried as the spring morning around her. She was 27 years old. She had been married for 7 months. She worked at a gallery she loved. She was rebuilding a relationship with her mother. She was beginning, slowly, to understand the Herefordshire estate, not as a responsibility she shared, not yet, but as a place she was learning, the way you learn a place when you intend to stay. She was making a life, not the life she had been told she should make, not the life she would have made if she had stayed still and waited for the conditions to be right. The one she had made by choosing, fast and honestly, and then by staying in the choosing. She ran back to the flat and came inside and stood in the hallway with her key still in the door and said, to Callum, who was reading at the kitchen table, "I want to talk about the future." He looked up. He put the book down with his thumb in his place, which was the version of his attention that meant he was listening, but also leaving room for the conversation to be brief if it needed to be. "All right," he said. She came and sat across from him and she said, "Not today, not in detail, but I want to talk about what we want the next few years to look like. The estate in London and the gallery and what the shape is. I don't need answers yet. I just want to start thinking out loud." He took his thumb out of the book and set it down properly. "Yes," he said. "I've been wanting to do that too." She looked at him. "Why didn't you start it?" "Because it involves asking you to consider things that cost you things," he said. "And I wanted to wait until you were ready to consider them rather than present them as a problem you needed to solve." She thought about this. She thought about the way he handled things, the care he took, the patience that was not avoidance but was a genuine waiting for the right conditions. "Start now," she said. He did. The conversation lasted 2 hours. It was the most direct and honest conversation she had ever had about the architecture of a life, and she was aware, while having it, that most people never had a conversation quite like this one, where two people sat with their actual circumstances and their actual preferences and their actual constraints, and tried to find an honest shape that contained all of them. They talked about London and Herefordshire. They talked about how much time they each needed in each place and how that might change over years. They talked about the gallery and whether there were ways to do the work she loved from a different base, or whether London was essential to it, and neither of them assumed the answer. They talked about what they wanted the Herefordshire estate to be. Not an obligation managed from a distance, not a burden passed down, something real, something lived in, something that earned its maintenance by being genuinely used. Callum had thoughts about this that she could hear had been forming for a long time, careful and specific thoughts about the land and the community around it, and what an estate could mean if it was managed with an eye toward something other than its own preservation. "I want it to be useful," he said, "not a monument, a place that does something for the people around it." She looked at him across the kitchen table. "That is a good thing to want," she said. "It'll take time," he said. "It'll take money we don't currently have available, and time we don't currently have, and probably several years of making mistakes and learning from them." "Yes," she said. "You're all right with that," he said. She thought about the question seriously, the way it deserved. "I have never been interested," she said, "in the kind of certainty that comes from not doing anything. The certainty you want when you ask me that. I cannot give it to you. I can tell you that I'm in it, that I'm here, that when we get to the parts we haven't planned for, I'll be next to you thinking about them." He looked at her. "That is enough," he said. "That is more than enough." The spring morning went on outside the window. She thought about what her mother had said once in the early days. Happiness becomes security. They become the same thing without you noticing. She had not believed it then. She was not sure she entirely believed it now in the way her mother meant it. But she thought about the feeling in her chest, the settled, unspectacular, daily feeling of being in the right place with the right person building the right thing, and she thought that perhaps her mother had not been wrong about the convergence, had just been wrong about the order, about which one came first. Not security becoming happiness, but happiness over time becoming its own kind of ground beneath your feet. She picked up his book from the table and found the page he had been on and started reading. He watched her for a moment and then got up to make coffee, and the morning continued, and outside the launderette hummed its ordinary hum, and the wildflowers in the jam jar were still fresh, and the yellow field print was on the wall where her father had wanted it to be. June came in on the back of a week of rain that the city bore with its usual patient irritability, and with it came something Nora had not anticipated. She was at work when it happened. A Thursday morning, the gallery quiet in the particular way of a gallery between exhibitions, the old show taken down and the walls bare and clean in a way she always liked, all that prepared possibility. Her phone rang, an unknown number which she almost ignored and then answered on the last ring. The voice said, "Is this Nora Ashwick?" She had not heard her married name said by a stranger before. It landed differently than she expected, not uncomfortably, but with a weight it had not had when she said it herself. "Yes," she said. The voice was a woman's, professional and slightly apologetic in the way of someone delivering information they know is unexpected. She was, she said, from a newspaper, one of the quality Sunday papers, not a tabloid, and they were running a piece about the Ashwick estate and its new direction under the 14th Duke's management, and they had been given to understand that the Duke's wife had a professional background in art, and they were wondering whether she might be willing to speak with them. Nora sat down in the chair behind the gallery desk. She said, "How did you get this number?" The woman said it had been provided by the estate's new communications contact, which was a person Callum had engaged the previous month to help with exactly this kind of thing, the slow and necessary process of the estate becoming publicly legible again after 2 years of near silence. She asked a few more questions. She took the journalist's name and contact details. She said she would think about it and call back. She sat at the gallery desk for a moment after the call ended and looked at the bare walls and thought about the word wife, about what it contained, practically, in her context. She was the wife of a duke who was restarting a quiet public life after an absence. She was, therefore, a person of a certain public legibility that she had not been before and had not particularly considered. She had thought about the estate and the title in terms of the private and domestic reality of them. She had not thought as fully about the external reality, the part where other people had views and articles were written and photographs were taken. She called Callum. He picked up on the second ring. "Someone called me," she said, "a journalist." "Yes," he said, "the Sunday piece. I was going to tell you about it tonight. It happened faster than I expected. I am sorry she called you directly. That should have gone through me first." "It's fine," she said. "I just wanted to know the context before I called back." "You don't have to speak to them," he said. "The piece can be about the estate and the tenancies and the restoration plans. It doesn't need to include you." She thought about this. "No," she said, "I think I should speak to them. I think if I stay invisible it makes things stranger, not simpler." He was quiet for a moment. "Are you sure?" "Yes," she said, "but I am going to have conditions." She called the journalist back the following morning, and she was direct about what she would and would not discuss. She would talk about her work at the gallery and her involvement in the estate going forward. She would not discuss the circumstances of the marriage or her mother or anything that was private rather than public. She would read anything attributed to her before publication. The journalist agreed. They had the conversation the following week over the phone, and it was an hour long and professional, and Nora found, to her slight surprise, that she was good at it. She was clear about what she was and was not, and she was comfortable in that clarity, and the journalist seemed to find her interesting in the way that people who do not expect straightforwardness find it when they receive it. The article ran in late June. It was a third of a page, mostly about the estate and Callum's plans for it, with 2 paragraphs about Nora that were accurate and unembellished, and said that she worked in art, which was true, and that she had brought her own perspective to the estate's future, which was also true, in the way of things that are said simply but are not simple. Her mother called the morning the piece ran. "I read the article," Vivienne said. "I know," Nora said. "You've already read it, it's only 7 in the morning." "I read it last night," Vivienne said. "It was available online." There was a pause. "You spoke well," Vivienne said. "You were clear." "Thank you," Nora said. Another pause, longer. "You said in the article," Vivienne said carefully, "that you see the estate as a place that should be of use to the community around it." "Yes," Nora said. "That is not a common view," Vivienne said, "among people in that position." "No," Nora agreed. "It is a good view," Vivienne said. And then, before Nora could respond, "Your father would have liked that very much." She said it in the voice she only sometimes used, the one that was just her mother, without the architecture around it. Nora stood in the flat in the early summer morning and held her phone and felt the complexity of everything, the whole of it, the March morning when she had walked out the door, the farmer's market, the register office, the Pemberton dinner, the kitchen table conversations, the article in the Sunday paper, all of it layered and real and continuous. "I know," she said, "I know he would." They said goodbye and she hung up and stood for a while without moving, looking at the yellow field print on the wall. It was not resolution. It was not a clearing of the air or a restoration of something to its previous state. You cannot go back to the previous state. You can only go forward into something new, which is more honest anyway, which is truer to what time actually does. It was a beginning, a different kind of beginning, in the direction of something she did not yet have a name for. She turned around. Callum was standing in the kitchen doorway in the morning light, holding 2 mugs of coffee, having let her have the phone call and the moment that followed it without interruption. She walked across the kitchen toward him. She thought, "This is the man I chose." She thought, "This is the life I made." She thought, "It is enough, more than enough. It is exactly the right amount." She took her coffee and they sat at the kitchen table, and the summer morning opened around them, warm and unhurried, the launderette not yet started below, the city still finding its feet, the birds on the television aerial across the road conducting whatever small territorial business they conducted every morning, and none of it asking anything of her except to be present in it. She was present in it. Completely. Summer in London at the end of July is the city running a temperature. The pavements hold the heat. The parks fill up past capacity on the weekends and empty in the evenings when the day finally releases itself. The river is busy and smells of itself, which is both better and worse than you remember depending on which direction the wind is blowing. Nora loved it. She had always loved it. The summer city, loud and slow and entirely itself, entirely ungovernable, the kind of city that does not change its character for the weather or the tourists or the difficulty of getting on a bus on a Saturday afternoon. She noticed that summer that she was thinking about the future differently from how she had thought about it before. Before Callum, before the register office, before the cream envelope in the Herefordshire kitchen and the article in the Sunday paper, she had thought about the future in a particular way, which was the way of someone who is uncertain they are in the right story. She had planned in the small, practical sense, rent and salary, and the trust that sat 9 years away on a horizon she chose not to look at directly. She had not planned in the large sense. She had not made pictures of what she wanted, what she was building toward, what the years ahead of her were going to contain. She was doing that now. Not with anxious precision, not with spreadsheets and 5-year projections, but she was living forward in a way she had not done before. She could see things. Not clearly and not certainly, but she could see the outline of a life that was hers in a way that previous versions had not quite been, that had elements she had chosen and was continuing to choose. Donna came for dinner on a Saturday in late July, at the flat, which was also Donna's favorite place to have dinner now, which she would not have predicted 2 years ago but which was, she said, the best kitchen table dinner she had access to. Nora cooked. Callum was in Herefordshire for the week and would be back Sunday, and she had the flat to herself for the evening, which was a thing she had not had for a long time, and which she found she enjoyed in a specific and unconcerned way that she recognized as healthy. Donna brought wine and news. The news was this: she had been offered a significant promotion at the publishing house. The kind that meant more responsibility and more money, and also, she acknowledged, the kind that would change the daily texture of her work in ways she was not entirely certain about. "So what are you going to do?" Nora said. "That is why I am here," Donna said. "I am going to eat your pasta and drink this wine and think out loud until it makes sense." They did exactly that for 2 hours. Nora listened and asked questions and offered observations where they were useful and did not try to solve it for her, because it was not a problem with a solution, it was a decision, which was different, and what you need when you are making a decision is not a solution but a witness. At the end of the 2 hours, Donna said, "I'm going to take it." "Yes," Nora said, "I thought you were." "Did you know from the beginning?" "I thought so, but it needed the 2 hours to be sure." Donna refilled her glass. She looked at Nora across the table in the way that she looked when she was about to say something she had been thinking about for a while. "You look different," she said. "Different how?" "Settled," she said. "Not in the wrong way, not in the way that means you've stopped. In the way that means you've arrived somewhere." Nora thought about this. "I feel different," she said. "Not all the time. Sometimes I still feel the same amount of uncertain about everything as I always did, but there is a layer under that which is stable, which wasn't there before." Donna nodded slowly. "You made a very strange choice very fast," she said, "and it worked." "It worked because of what it was," Nora said. "Not because I was lucky. I knew something about him that I could not have put into words yet, but I knew it." "The way he looked at you like you were interesting," Donna said. "Yes," Nora said, "and the way he was patient without being passive, and the way he fixed things without needing you to tell him they were broken." Donna looked at her for a moment. "I am glad," she said. "I want you to know I am genuinely glad." "I know," Nora said, "I know you are." They sat with the wine and the empty pasta bowls, and the comfortable silence of two people who have known each other for a decade, and do not need to fill the quiet. After Donna left, Nora called Callum. He answered from the Herefordshire kitchen. She could tell from the acoustics, the particular depth of the room, the faint sound of the range. "How was dinner?" he said. "Good," she said. "She's taking the promotion." "Good for her," he said. She told him about the conversation. He listened and asked a question about Donna's hesitation that Nora found surprisingly accurate given that he had met Donna fewer than 10 times. "You have a good read on people," she said. "I pay attention," he said. "You taught me to name it, I think. I always did it, but you made me aware I was doing it." She sat on the kitchen floor, which was where she often sat when she talked on the phone, a habit she had had since university that she had never examined and saw no reason to change. "Tell me about the week," she said. He told her. The North Wing structural work was underway, a team of 3 who had been working quietly and carefully and had made better progress than expected. The conversation with Hugh's family about the land had produced a new idea that Callum was excited about in the quiet way he got excited about things, which was a slight increase in the speed and specificity of his sentences. The idea was this: the estate had a parcel of land that had been unused for 6 years, not farmable at its current state but restorable. Hugh's eldest daughter, who was 24 and had studied agricultural ecology, had presented Callum with a modest proposal for turning it into a managed wildflower meadow and orchard, which would support the local ecology, provide some income through honey and heritage fruit sales, and potentially be open to the local community for educational visits. "She is very good," Callum said. "She knows what she's talking about and she was direct about what she needed and what the realistic timeline was. I want to give her the land and the resource to try it." Nora sat on the kitchen floor and listened. "This is the thing you meant," she said. "About the estate being useful." "Yes," he said. "It's a small version of it, but it's a real version." "Do it," she said. "I'm going to," he said. "I just wanted to tell you." "You don't need to clear it with me," she said. "I know," he said. "I wanted to tell you because you are interested and I like that you are interested, not permission, just sharing." She smiled at the kitchen floor. "Come home tomorrow," she said. "I'm leaving at 8, he said. August brought her mother to Herefordshire. This had not been planned. It had emerged from a conversation at one of the Sunday lunches, the 3rd or 4th, the ones that had become a rhythm, still careful but less performed than they had been at the beginning. Her mother had mentioned, in passing, that she had not been to Herefordshire since Nora was a child. A school friend's family had had a house near Ross-on-Wye. Callum had said, the way he said things that were genuine invitations and not social fictions, "Come see it." Vivienne had looked at him, he had looked back, and something in that exchange, the directness of it, the complete absence of motive beyond the stated one, had produced in Vivienne Ashford the most authentic response Nora had seen from her in years, which was, she said yes. They drove down in Vivienne's car on a Thursday. Nora sat in the back with a book she did not read. Her mother drove with the focused precision she applied to everything, and Callum sat in the passenger seat and talked to her about the route and the county, and Vivienne asked questions that were, Nora noticed, genuinely curious questions rather than conversational protocol questions. Patricia met them at the door. She and Vivienne had the exchange of two women who are each precise in their own domain and are immediately calibrating to one another, which took about 90 seconds and resolved into a mutual, wordless respect. The kitchen. Vivienne walked into the Herefordshire kitchen and stopped. She stood in the middle of the flagstone floor and looked at the range and the long table and the window above the sink with the kitchen garden beyond it, still producing in the August warmth, and she stood there for long enough that Patricia and Callum exchanged a quick look. "My mother had a kitchen like this," Vivienne said. She said it quietly, not to anyone in particular. No one said anything. Her mother's house, she said, and she was explaining it now, moving out of the private moment and into the shared one. She had a kitchen table like this. We spent whole days in it. A pause. I have not thought about that in a long time. Nora looked at her mother, who was standing in a kitchen in Herefordshire looking at something none of them could see. She thought about the things that people bury, the things they put under efficiency and precision and control, because it is easier to be excellent than to be open, easier to plan than to feel, easier to build walls than to sit with what the walls were built to keep out. She thought about the long oak table and the triangular toast and the pale gray eyes. She thought, she is my mother, she is real and complicated, and she is also my mother. "Come and see the garden," Nora said. They went and saw the garden. Patricia walked them through it, naming things, the late summer beans still going, the tomatoes, the herbs, the section that had been established for years and the newer section that had been cleared and replanted. Vivienne listened and occasionally said something that showed she knew about gardens, which Nora had not known, had never seen, because the house in London had no garden to speak of. After the tour, Patricia made tea and they sat at the long table, and Vivienne was quiet in a way that was not withdrawn but was genuinely absorbing something, the way she used to sit sometimes when Nora was very young, before the precision became the only gear. Callum talked about the plans for the estate, not formally, just talked the way he talked, as though the conversation was happening between people who were all genuinely interested in the same thing and had different contributions to make to it. Vivienne asked one question and then another, and the questions were good questions, the kind that show understanding rather than demonstrating it. On the drive back, Nora sat in the back again, and her mother drove, and the evening came in across the fields on either side, and the car was quiet. After about 40 minutes her mother said, "He loves it." "Yes," Nora said. "He loves it the way your father loved things," Vivienne said, quietly, without needing to be seen loving it. Nora looked at the back of her mother's head, at the precise pin of her hair. "Yes," she said again, softly. Vivienne was quiet after that, for the rest of the drive. When they dropped her outside her house, she got out and turned and looked at Nora through the open car door, and she said, "You chose well." 3 words. 3 words that had cost her something, that had come from somewhere under the precision and the planning, from the part of her that was also just a woman who had once spent whole days in a kitchen like that one. Nora looked back at her. "Thank you," she said. It was the truest exchange they had ever had. They drove back to East Finchley in the darkness that had arrived while they were in the car. The stars visible briefly before the city's glow consumed them as they crossed into London proper, the sky ahead going orange and familiar, the particular color of a city that does not fully sleep. Callum drove and she sat in the passenger seat now, because her mother's departure had returned it to her, and she thought about 3 words and what they cost and what they gave. She thought about her father, who had never had to say 3 words because he had spent his whole life demonstrating the thing without needing to name it. And she thought about her mother, who had spent the same length of time demonstrating the other thing, the careful and defended thing, and how 3 words in a car door in the August evening had revealed what was underneath it all along. She said, "You chose well," she said to Callum. "I know," he said, "I heard. How do you feel about that?" He thought for a moment. "She is very like you," he said. Nora looked at him. "In what way?" "You are both precise when you are uncertain and exact when you are sure," he said. "And you are both most honest when something has caught you off guard, when you do not have time to organize it first." She thought about this. "That is not a comfortable thing to hear," she said. "No," he said, "but it is a true one." She looked at the road, at the approaching lights of the suburbs. "She will be all right," Nora said, not about anything specific, more about the general question of her mother, which she had been carrying for years and which felt, in the aftermath of the Herefordshire visit, lighter than it had. "Yes," Callum said, "she will, she has you." "And now she has you," Nora said. He glanced at her briefly. "Yes," he said. "She does." They came back into the city and through it, the evening traffic, the late-open shops with their light falling out onto the pavement, the parks dark behind their railings, the restaurants full of people who had found each other for the evening and were making the best of the light while it lasted. She thought about what a year it had been. Not a long year, not a difficult year, not the kind of year that requires survival, but full. So full that when she tried to hold it all at once she could not, had to take it in pieces, a Saturday market and a carrot and coriander soup and a civil ceremony and a flat above a launderette and a cream envelope and a long kitchen table and a woman standing in a kitchen looking at something from her past. Full of people too. Edna and Patricia and Donna and Owen and Hugh's daughter with her wildflower meadow proposal and Norman Whitfield folding his documents back into his leather case. Gerald Pemberton's genuine laugh. Celia and the botanical prince. Dennis at the pub who knew what they wanted without being told. People were the whole of it. That was what you learned if you were paying attention, and she was. The decisions you made, the choices you lived in, all of it arrived through people, required people, was changed by people, was only real because of people. She had chosen a person. That was in the end the whole of what she had done. She had walked out of one kitchen and into a farmer's market, and she had chosen, without enough information and with complete clarity, a person who was right. Everything else was the life that unfolded from that one thing. The flat came into view, the launderette below closed and dark, the window of the flat above warm in the night. She had been everywhere and she was home. "Callum," she said, as he was pulling into the space. "Yes," he said. "I am glad I married you," she said. He turned off the engine and sat for a moment. "I am glad you asked me," he said. She had asked him, that was right. She had sat at her own kitchen table and said, "I want to marry you." She had done it directly and quickly and without enough information and with complete certainty, and she had been right. That was what it came down to. She had been right. They went upstairs and made tea, as they always did, as they had done the first evening at Edna's table and every evening since, the small reliable ceremony of it. And they sat at the kitchen table and the city went on below and around them, and the flat smelled of its ordinary self and the yellow field print was on the wall where it had always been. She looked at the print. She thought about her father saying the world gets larger. She thought, yes, that is exactly right. She drank her tea. September came the way second summers sometimes do, bright and slightly surprised at itself, as though the year had expected to be done with warmth by now and had found, unexpectedly, more to give. Nora was standing in the kitchen of the flat making her morning tea, when she realized something that made her stand still with the kettle in mid-pour. She had not thought about the trust in 4 months. Not once, not the 9 years or the 35 or the condition or the solicitor's letter from the previous year that had arrived at her mother's behest to remind her of its existence. The thing that had hung above her for years, the inheritance her father had left in a form that required something of her to access, had simply stopped occupying space in her mind. She set the kettle down and thought about when that had happened. She could not find the exact moment. It had not been a decision. It had been more like the way a sound fades when you stop attending to it, not gone, not resolved, simply no longer the thing your ear was tracking. She tried to remember what it had felt like to calculate around it, to feel its weight in the daily arithmetic of her life. She could remember it intellectually. She could not quite feel her way back into it. She was on the other side of it in a way she had not noticed crossing. She thought, She finished making the tea. She brought 2 mugs through to where Callum was sitting with a folder of estate papers at the kitchen table, which had become the morning arrangement on the days when they were both in London. Him with the estate, and her with the gallery preparation she sometimes did from home, the 2 of them doing their separate work in the same room. She sat down and he looked up briefly and looked back at his papers, and she opened her laptop and thought for a moment before she started anything. "I forgot about the trust," she said. He looked up. "What do you mean?" he said. "I mean I forgot about it, not today. I mean I forgot about it months ago and didn't notice I'd forgotten about it." She paused. "I've been calculating my life around it for years. And then I stopped and didn't notice when I stopped." He set down the folder. "What does that tell you?" he said. She thought about it. "That I don't need it," she said. "Or rather that I need it less than I needed to feel free of what it was attached to." She looked at the table. "The money was a real concern, it still is in the practical sense. We are not rich, Callum, the estate will take years to stabilize and the gallery does not pay what it should. These are real facts." "Yes," he said. "But the trust was not only about money," she said. "It was my mother holding the shape of a life over my head in the form of a legal document. And the moment I stopped being under that shape, the money question became separate, just a practical thing to manage. Not a thing that defined me." He looked at her steadily. "You could talk to a solicitor," he said, "about the trust conditions. It may be that the original conditions can be revisited given the circumstances." "I know," she said. "I'll get around to it." "It is your father's money," he said. "He meant it for you." "I know," she said, "and I'll deal with it. I'm just noticing that the weight of it has gone." She wrapped both hands around her mug. "That is the interesting thing, that is what I wanted to tell you." He was quiet for a moment. "The weight of the estate was like that for me," he said. "I carried it for so long that I did not know I was carrying it. And then I put it down, and the shape of me without it was strange, and I had to relearn how to stand. And then I picked it back up, but differently, not the way my father carried it, the way I want to carry it." She looked at him. "Yes," she said, "like that." They went back to their respective work. October came, a full year after the register office and the Fresias from the petrol station, and Donna in her green coat and Owen shaking Callum's hand with such enthusiasm. They did not plan anything elaborate. This was by agreement, not by oversight. They had talked about it in September and both said within the same 2 minutes that they did not want a ceremony of any kind. They had enough real life. They did not need a performance of it. What they did was go to the farmers' market on the Finsbury Road, on the Saturday nearest to the date. They went early before the crowds, and they walked through the stalls while the morning was still quiet, and he bought carrier bags for a woman who had dropped hers in a puddle, and she bought apples and a loaf of seeded bread, and they drank paper cups of coffee from the stall at the end, and they did not remark on any of it in the way you remark on significant things, because it was also just a Saturday morning at a market. But she knew, and he knew, and the Saturday morning knew in the way that places know things they have held. On Sunday, Edna came for dinner. Edna arrived in a taxi that she insisted on paying for and which she tipped extravagantly, and she came upstairs to the flat with a pot of carrot and coriander soup that she had made that morning, and she sat at the kitchen table with the satisfied authority of a woman who has brought the correct thing. "You are both well," she said, as a statement rather than a question. She looked at them in turn. She had the quality that Nora had noticed from the first evening. Edna saw things, not intrusively, not presumptuously, but fully. She looked at people and arrived at accurate conclusions. "We are very well," Nora said. "Good," said Edna. "It's not nothing, you know, being well. People underestimate it because it doesn't make a story, but it is everything." They ate the soup. They ate the bread that Nora had bought at the market the day before. They talked about Edna's catering and about the estate, and about the Wildflower Meadow project, which had now been formally agreed and begun, the first section of land cleared and planted in late September with a mix that would establish over winter and bloom in the spring. Edna asked about Vivienne, which was interesting because she had never met Vivienne and knew her only from what Nora had told her over the course of the year. How is she? Edna said. Better, Nora said, more herself, less defended. That happens, Edna said, when people get older and they are not quite as frightened anymore. Or when something happens that costs them enough that the armor becomes too heavy, and they simply have to set some of it down. The visit to Herefordshire, Nora said, the kitchen. Yes, Edna said, who knew the story. Kitchens do that. Kitchens have a particular power over people who have loved one. They are the most honest rooms. After Edna left, Callum washed up and Nora dried, and they worked in the comfortable parallel of two people who have done this enough times that the division of labor has become automatic and requires no discussion. She thought about what Edna had said, about it not making a story but being everything. She thought about the stories people tell about their lives, the ones that have shape and drama and a clear moment where everything changed. She had one of those stories, she knew that. From the outside it looked like one. Defiant daughter marries poor man turns out to be a duke, mother is confounded, daughter wins. But from the inside, it did not feel like a story with a winner. It felt like a life, ongoing, daily, requiring attention, producing small moments of beauty and difficulty and the ordinary grace of people who choose each other and keep choosing. That was the thing no story ever quite captured, the keep choosing, the returning every morning to the same decision and finding it still good. That was the material of it. That was what she was doing. She dried the last dish and set it in the cupboard and leaned against the counter and looked at Callum, who was cleaning the pot. Edna had brought the soup in, taking care of it because it was hers, and he would give it back clean. I want to start spending more time in Herefordshire, she said. He turned. I've been thinking about it, she said. The gallery is good, but it is not the only thing I can do with what I know. There are ways to use what I do at the estate. The house has rooms that have never been properly documented, art and objects that have just sat in cupboards for decades. I want to think about what could be done with that. He was very still in the way he was still when he was receiving something important. What kind of thing? He said. I don't know yet, she said. Something that connects the estate to people, not just tourism, something more real, an archive maybe, or a program or something I haven't thought of yet. He looked at her. The wildflower meadow, he said, but for art. She smiled, yes, something like that. He dried his hands on the kitchen towel. He came and stood across from her. I want that, he said. I want it very much. Then we'll do it, she said. It'll take time, he said. We'll have to figure out the funding and the legal structure and how it connects to the estate's charitable status, which is something Norman Whitfield has been gently suggesting we establish properly. I know, she said, I'm not saying this weak, I'm saying this is the direction. He looked at her, at the person she was. At the person she had been in a farmer's market on a Saturday morning, holding someone else's apples. Yes, he said, this is the direction. She looked at the kitchen window. The October evening was dark and the lights of East Finchley were on, and the launderette below had its sign still lit, the reliable orange glow of it, the particular comfort of a thing that is simply there and working. She thought, a year ago I was at a register office. A year before that I was at a long oak table eating a perfectly poached egg and making a decision I did not yet know I had already made. She thought, look where you end up. She thought, this is where you end up when you choose honestly and stay in the choosing. She said none of this out loud, she did not need to. She pushed off the counter and went to make tea, which was the thing, the ordinary and perfect thing, the nightly ritual of the flat, and she heard him behind her putting away the last things in the cupboards, and the launderette glowed below them, and somewhere down the road a dog barked once and went quiet, and it was the most ordinary Tuesday evening there had ever been. November came in grey and useful. She liked November, which was a thing she had always been slightly embarrassed to admit, because November was not the kind of month that people admitted to liking. It was too bare and too damp and too committed to reminding you that the year was running out. But she had always found November clarifying, the trees giving up their color. The evenings arriving earlier, honest about it, not trying to extend themselves beyond their welcome. The city under cloud, all its edges softened. She had been thinking since October about what she had said in the kitchen, the direction, and now that November had arrived and the particular quality of its light was making her feel the truth of things a little more clearly than usual, she sat down one morning with a notebook, an actual notebook, paper, the kind she had always kept for things she was thinking seriously about, and she started writing it down. Not a plan, not yet, but the beginning of a shape. The Herefordshire estate had rooms that contained things. She had understood this in January, when she had walked through them for the first time, and it had deepened over the subsequent visits. Objects that had accumulated across generations without any particular system of record or thought. Paintings, mostly portraits and landscapes, and the occasional still life that someone had brought home from somewhere at some point and hung on a wall and left there. Some of it was significant, some of it was not. Almost none of it had been properly assessed. Patricia knew what was in the rooms. She knew because she had cleaned them and maintained them for 22 years. But her knowledge was practical rather than documentary. She knew that the second painting on the right in the long corridor had a crack developing in its lower left corner and needed attention. She did not know who had painted it or when or what it depicted beyond the obvious. Nora wanted to know those things. She wanted to know all of them. She had spoken to her gallery's director, a woman named Helen who was careful and thoughtful and whom Nora respected, about whether there were models for this kind of work, the documentation and activation of a private estate's art and object collection. Helen had sent her 3 papers on the subject and 1 contact name, a woman who had done similar work at 2 other historic houses and who was now at a university and might be persuadable to consult. Nora had written to the woman but had not yet heard back. She wrote in her notebook, assessment first, then documentation, then purpose, not the other way around. She wrote, the purpose has to be real or it is just a museum. It has to connect to people outside the gate. She wrote, ask Patricia what she knows. She looked at this list and added, ask Edna what she thinks. Edna has strong opinions about purpose and they are reliably sound. She closed the notebook and went to work. At the gallery that morning, she had 3 conversations that were, without her quite planning it, all about the same thing from different angles. One was with a young artist who had submitted work for consideration and who came in to talk about it, and who was 23 and working out of a studio in an area of London that was still affordable but probably would not be for much longer. The second was with a collector who had been coming to the gallery for years and who had started recently asking questions about estate collections and whether they were ever accessible, because he had seen a piece in a country house auction that should, in his view, have remained where it was rather than being dispersed. The third was with Helen, who brought her a tea at 11 and said, with the directness she was known for, "You're thinking about something." "I'm always thinking about something," Nora said. "About Herefordshire," Helen said. Nora looked at her. "How do you know?" "Because you have the look," Helen said, "the one you get when you are not fully here, and you have been getting it more frequently in recent months, which is not a complaint, just an observation. You are building towards something." Nora told her, not everything, not in the careful, composed way of a presentation, but honestly from the notebook, from the questions she had been sitting with, the assessment, the documentation, the purpose, the wildflower meadow as a model, the connection to people outside the gate. Helen listened. She had a way of listening that was, in its own fashion, similar to Callum's, genuine and unhurried, with the quality of attention that receives rather than waits. When Nora finished, Helen was quiet for a moment. "You're going to leave us," she said. Nora looked at her. "Not immediately," she said. "No," Helen said, "but eventually, not because you want to leave this, because what you're describing is larger." Nora had not said this to herself yet, not in those words, and hearing Helen say it produced a feeling that was half uncomfortable and half relief, the feeling of a true thing recognized. "I would not want to leave badly," she said. "I would not want to leave at all in some ways. This place has been very important to me." "I know," Helen said, "and it has been important to have you in it. But Nora, what you are describing, a serious effort to document and open a historic collection with a genuine community purpose, that is significant work. That is not a side project, that is a career." Nora sat with this. "I might be wrong about what it is," she said. "I might get to Herefordshire and find the collection is modest and the ambition exceeds the material." "That would still teach you something," Helen said. "And you would know where to go next." She walked home from the gallery that evening through the early dark of a November afternoon, and the city was doing its evening thing, the commuters and the lit shops and the smell of food from restaurants warming up for the night. And she thought about the word career, which she had always applied to herself in the qualified, apologetic way of someone who liked what they did, but wasn't quite certain it deserved the full weight of the word. She stopped on the pavement at the corner of her road and stood there for a moment. She had a career. She had always had a career. It had simply taken this year to understand what shape it was in the process of becoming. She went home. The flat was warm and smelled of something cooking, which meant Callum was back from Herefordshire, which she had expected but had not been certain of because the drive times were always approximate. She came in and he was at the stove and he looked over his shoulder and said, "Good day." "Yes," she said, "a very good one." She took her coat off and came and looked at what he was making, and it was pasta, the reliable pasta, the kind they had made from whatever was in the fridge on nights when neither of them had planned ahead, and she thought, this is also the life. This is also the whole of it, the walk home through the November dark and the warm flat and the pasta and the man at the stove. "I talked to Helen today," she said. "What did she say?" he said. She told him about the look she gets, about the word larger, about the career she had been building without knowing it was the one she was building. He listened and stirred, and when she finished he said, "She is right." "I know," Nora said. "How do you feel about it?" She sat at the kitchen table and thought about how she felt. "Ready," she said, "not today, not next month, but in the direction of ready." He came and set a bowl of pasta in front of her and sat across from her. "Then we go in that direction," he said. She picked up her fork. Outside, November went on doing its November things, bare and clear and honest. Inside, the flat was warm and the pasta was good, and the yellow field print was on the wall, and the life continued, forward and forward, into the shape of itself. The winter that year arrived in the second week of December with a determination it had not shown in previous years. Not snow, this was London, which mostly discussed snow rather than experiencing it, but a cold that was serious about itself, the kind that found the gaps in window frames and the space under doors, and settled into the corners of rooms with the permanence of something that intends to stay a while. The flat above the launderette was warmer than most, by virtue of the heat rising from below. Nora had begun to think of this as one of the flat's best features, which she acknowledged was a slightly low threshold for a best feature but which she stood by anyway. She was at the kitchen table on a Tuesday morning with her notebook and her tea, Callum still asleep, the flat quiet around her with the early morning quality of a space that has not yet been fully occupied by the day. She was writing down questions, not answers. This was something she had learned in the months of thinking about Herefordshire, that the right questions were more useful than premature answers, and that writing them down made them real in a way that thinking them did not. The questions were about the collection. She had, in October and November, made 2 further visits to the estate specifically to walk the rooms with a camera and a notepad, and she had started the process, rough and early, of understanding what was there. Patricia had joined her on both visits and had been, it turned out, an extraordinary resource, with a granular memory for the contents of rooms and a dry, precise way of describing them that was more useful than enthusiasm. The collection was, as she had suspected and hoped, genuinely interesting. Not uniformly significant, not the kind of thing that would make an auction house's heart race, but real and layered and full of the specific texture of a family who had accumulated things over centuries without anyone deciding to be systematic about it. There were 3 paintings she wanted a specialist to look at, a small carved box that Patricia believed came from the estate of a relative who had been in India in the 1800s, a collection of botanical watercolors that were unsigned and unmounted, but were the best technical drawings she had seen outside a museum. And books, the library, which she had not fully reckoned with on the January visit, was extraordinary in the humble and particular way that old working libraries are extraordinary. Not display, not prestige, just centuries of reading, actual reading. The books handled and annotated and occasionally repaired, and always returned to their shelf because someone was going to need them again. She wrote in the notebook, the library might be the center of everything. She underlined it. She had heard back from the university woman, her name was Dr. Frances Cole, and she had written back after a 2-week silence with a response that was 4 paragraphs long and extremely specific, and which said, among other things, that what Nora was describing was exactly the kind of project she found most interesting, and that she would be willing to come and look at the collection in February if that suited. It suited very much. She was writing the list of questions she wanted Dr. Cole to help her think through when Callum came through in the way he came through in the mornings, gradual and unhurried, filling the kettle and standing at the counter while it boiled, not yet speaking, which was one of the things she had learned to be grateful for about him, that he did not require the morning to be immediately social. He made his tea, he came and sat across from her. He looked at the notebook. "Francis Cole," he said, reading the top of the page. "February," she said. He nodded, satisfied. "There is something I want to talk to you about," he said. She looked up. He had the look he had when he had been thinking about something for a while, not serious exactly, but considered. "The trust," he said. She waited. "I spoke to Norman Whitfield last week," he said, "about your father's trust, not about restructuring it or anything formal, just a conversation. I wanted to understand the legal landscape." She had not asked him to do this. She had not known he was going to do it. "And," she said, "the conditions of the trust are what they are," he said. "You have met them, you are married, the trust is accessible." She had known this. She had known it for a year and had not done anything about it because the weight of it had gone, and without the weight she kept forgetting, there was a practical thing to do. "Yes," she said, "I've been meaning to call my own solicitor." "You should do it," he said, "not because we need it urgently. Because it is your father's money, and he intended it for you and you have earned it, and it should be in your hands." She looked at him. "I know," she said. "The project," he said, "the collection and Dr. Cole and whatever comes from that will need funding. The trust could provide a foundation, not the only source, not a solution to everything, but a foundation." She thought about this, about the money that had hung over her life for years as a condition, as a mechanism of control, as the financial expression of her mother's architecture, and how it was now in the hands of the right circumstances, simply what it had been intended to be, her father reaching forward across time, giving his daughter what he could. "He would have liked what we are doing with it," she said. "Yes," Callum said, "I think he would." She closed the notebook. "I'll call the solicitor today," she said. She called the solicitor that morning during a break from the pavement outside the gallery in the December cold, and the conversation was brief and practical, and she noted with some amusement, almost completely free of emotional weight. It was simply a thing to do, she did it, she made the appointment, she would go in the following week. The week before Christmas, Donna came over. She came on a Wednesday evening, which was not the usual Sunday pattern, and she came with something in her eyes that Nora recognized as news that needed to be delivered in person. She sat at the kitchen table and she said, "I have been offered a position in New York." Nora set down her mug. "Tell me," she said. Donna told her. It was a significant position, a real step, the kind of opportunity that appears once and does not repeat itself, and it was in New York, which meant it was not in London, which meant it was not 5 minutes from Donna's kitchen table or 35 minutes from Nora's door. "Are you taking it?" Nora said. Donna looked at her. Her eyes were steady and also, underneath, frightened in the clear-eyed way of someone who knows they are going to do a frightening thing and is making peace with it. "Yes," she said. Nora looked at her friend. Her friend of 11 years, dormitory at 17, the person who had been on the other end of every significant call, who had said of Callum, "He looks at you like you are interesting," who had worn a green coat to the register office, who had eaten pasta at this table more times than either of them had counted. "Good," Nora said. Donna's expression shifted. "Good," she said. "It is the right move," Nora said. "It is exactly where you should be going, and I would tell you that even if it was the other side of the world, because it is true." "It is not the other side of the world," Donna said. "It is New York, you can come and visit." "Yes," Nora said, "I can." "And you can call," Donna said. "I can call," Nora said. "And you have him," Donna said. "You have Edna. You have Patricia and Hugh's daughter with her wildflowers and Dr. Cole in February. You have your mother learning to be different. You are not alone." "I know," Nora said. "I have never been so not alone in my life." Donna looked at her steadily, across the kitchen table. "You are all right," she said, "not a question." "I am genuinely, solidly all right," Nora said, "which is not a thing I have always been able to say." They sat with that, the flat was warm around them. Below, the laundrette worked its night cycle. "Tell me everything about New York," Nora said. Everything you know. Donna told her everything she knew, and they talked until midnight. And when Donna left, she hugged Nora for a long time on the landing, and neither of them said anything, because some things do not need words, and they had both known that since they were 17. Nora went back inside. Callum was reading, which was where she had left him, and he looked up when she came in. "New York," he said. "New York," she said. "How do you feel?" She sat down on the sofa beside him. "Proud of her," she said, "and I will miss her, and fine, all at once the way things always are." He put his arm around her. She leaned her head against his shoulder. The book was still open in his other hand, and she could read the page from where she was, and she read a paragraph of it, not intending to, just because it was there, and it was good, and she thought she would ask him what it was later. Christmas came. For the first time in her adult life, Nora spent Christmas morning not at her mother's house, not alone, not navigating the particular performance of a family holiday that had always felt like a photograph of a family holiday rather than the real thing. She spent it in the kitchen at Herefordshire, which Patricia had left in a state of extraordinary preparedness before going to her own family, and which she and Callum filled with the sounds of actual cooking, the kind that goes wrong in small ways and is fixed in small ways and ends up, regardless, as food that feeds people. Vivienne came on Christmas Day. She came in her car, alone, with a present for Nora that turned out to be a scarf, and a present for Callum that was a book she had chosen for him specifically, which meant she had thought about him specifically, which was, Nora understood, a large and real thing. They ate at the long kitchen table, the three of them, with the kitchen warm and the grounds outside white with the light frost that had come overnight, not quite snow, but close enough that the garden wore it well. Vivienne sat at the table in the kitchen that had made her remember her mother's kitchen, in the house she had told her daughter not to marry into, eating with the man she had not wanted Nora to marry, and she was fine. More than fine. She was, if Nora was reading her correctly, something she had not expected, grateful. After dinner, while Callum was washing up and Nora was putting away, Vivienne sat at the table with her wine and looked at the kitchen, and she said, quietly, to no one in particular, "Your father would have liked this." Nora did not turn around. She kept her hands on what she was doing. "I know," she said, "we think about him here." Her mother did not say anything more. She did not need to. The kitchen held it. January. A new year in the flat above the laundrette, in the particular fresh silence of January mornings that feel like a clean page. Nora was at the kitchen table, notebook open, Dr. Cole's visit confirmed for the 16th, the solicitor's paperwork nearly complete, the gallery wrapping around her in the way it always had, familiar and good, the last few months of it precious in the particular way of things you know you are beginning to leave. She was not leaving yet, she had time. She was, as she had said to Callum, in the direction of ready. The kettle finished, she made the tea. She sat back down and looked at the notebook, and the window, and the beginning of the morning light on the rooftops. She thought about a Saturday in March, more than a year ago, standing on the pavement outside her mother's house with the spring morning in front of her and nothing decided, and how she had walked away from that table and toward this one, not in a straight line, not by plan but by choice, one honest choice after another, each one producing the conditions for the next. She thought about a farmer's market, and someone else's crates and apples rolling toward a drain. She thought about a register office and freesias, and the most ordinary ceremony she had ever been part of, which had also been the most significant. She thought about a flat above a laundrette, and a radiator that made a noise and bookshelves that were slightly uneven, and a yellow field print on a wall that moved from place to place, but was always there. She thought about Herefordshire in January, bare and honest, a kitchen with a long table and a window above a sink, a wildflower meadow in its first season, the seeds set, the winter over them, waiting for spring to happen. She thought about the direction of ready. She thought, all right. She drank her tea, and she opened the notebook to a new page. The new page was blank. She looked at it for a moment before she wrote anything, which was a habit she had developed in the past year, this deliberate pause before beginning, a small act of respect for the blankness before it became something. The first thing she wrote was, "What do I know?" Not about the collection or the estate or the project that was forming, about all of it, about herself, about the year and where it had taken her and what it had left behind. She wrote and she did not edit, and she did not think about whether it was useful or would go anywhere. She just wrote, the way she had started to write things in the past few months when she was working out what she actually believed rather than what she had been told to believe or what was convenient to believe. She wrote, I know that a fast decision can be the right decision when it comes from the right place. She wrote, I know that the right place is not certainty. It is honesty about uncertainty. It is making the choice while still holding the not knowing, rather than waiting for the not knowing to go away. She wrote, I know that the person who fixes things is the person worth keeping. She wrote, I know that a kitchen table is the most important piece of furniture in any house. She wrote, I know that my mother is trying, and that trying is enough, and that expecting more than trying from a person who has spent decades not trying is the kind of expectation that makes both of you smaller. She wrote, I know that Donna will be extraordinary in New York. She wrote, I know that grief can make a person into a fortress, and that the fortress protects something real even when it also locks things out, and that the locks can be opened from the inside when the person inside is ready, and that you cannot make them ready. She wrote, I know that the world gets larger when you let it. She put the pen down. She looked at what she had written and she thought, this is not a story with a neat ending. It is a person in the middle of a life. And she thought that is the correct place to be. The door to the bedroom opened, and Callum came through. He was wearing the old grey pullover that had developed a small hole in the left cuff that he had been meaning to mend for 2 months, and had not yet gotten around to. He was only half awake in the particular Callum way, which was not disheveled but was unguarded, which was different. What time is it? He said. 7:15, she said. He made a sound that was approximately an acknowledgement and went to the kettle. She watched him fill it. She thought, this is the man who carried crates in a market for £30. This is the man who bought a cracked watch at a stall on the way to a train because he wanted to own something by choice rather than by inheritance. This is the man who built bookshelves in a flat and also owns 46 rooms. This is the man who fixed my radiator and my lamp and who sits nearby on Tuesday evenings when I cry without knowing why. She thought, I know him. Not all of him. Not the whole of any person, which was not available. But she knew him in the real and daily way of knowing, the kind built from Tuesday evenings and farmers' market Saturdays and pasta made from whatever was in the fridge and conversations at kitchen tables that lasted 2 hours and solved nothing and clarified everything. He brought her a mug and set it beside the notebook without looking at what was written there. She loved him for that too. Herefordshire today, she said. Thursday, he said. Today is here. He sat down. What are you writing? What I know, she said. He nodded. She turned the notebook slightly so he could read it if he wanted to. He did not read it. He looked at her instead. And he said. And I know quite a lot, she said. More than I knew a year ago. What's the most important one, he said. She thought about it. She thought about all of it. The March morning and the market and the register office in Herefordshire in January and the Pemberton dinner and her mother in a doorway saying you chose well and Donna's coat and Edna's soup and Patricia's patient, particular knowledge of rooms. She said that the point is not the destination. The point is that you are in the right story with the right person and you both know it. He looked at her across the kitchen table. Yes, he said, that's it exactly. They drank their tea. Outside, January was being cold and honest, and the launderette had not yet opened, and the city was in the state of considering the day, and the birds on the aerial across the road were beginning their morning consultation, and the yellow field print was on the wall, and the notebook was open to a new page. She picked up her pen. She thought, there is more to write. She thought, there is always more to write. She began. She wrote about the wildflower meadow and what it would look like in spring when the seeds came through. She wrote about the library at Herefordshire and the unsigned botanical watercolors and the questions she had for Dr. Cole. She wrote about the gallery and the conversations it had given her and what she was carrying forward from it. She wrote about the trust money, which felt, now that she was doing the practical thing about it, simply like a resource, like a tool, like something to use rather than something to weigh. She wrote about the things she wanted to build, the documentation project, the community connection, The idea, still forming, of an education program that would bring young people from the surrounding area into the house and the grounds in a way that was real and not tourism, that treated them as inheritors of the place rather than visitors to it. She wrote about her mother and what the next year with her might be like, and she found that when she wrote about her mother, the feeling in her chest was one she could not entirely name, but which was warmer than she expected and steadier than she had hoped for. She wrote, "I want to make things that last." She underlined it. Not monuments, not institutions that preserve themselves at the expense of being alive. Things that were genuinely useful, genuinely connected to the people around them, genuinely trying to do something with what they had. The kind of things her father would have liked, the kind of things that made the world larger. She looked at what she had written. She looked at the page full now and the next page blank and waiting. She thought about the conversation at the kitchen table in October when she had said, "This is the direction," and he had said, "Then we go in that direction." That was all it was, a direction, not a destination, not a finished plan, not a guarantee of anything, just a direction that they had chosen together, clearly and honestly, and were going in. She closed the notebook. She picked up her mug. She looked across the table at the man who had carried someone else's crates for 30 pounds and chosen a cracked watch because he wanted something of his own, and come to London to find out who he was when he was only himself. "What are you thinking?" she said. He looked at her. "That the pasta last night was not quite as good as the one I made in November," he said. "I think I used too much black pepper." She laughed. It was a real laugh, the kind that starts somewhere in the chest and arrives without warning and sounds like you, sounds exactly like you, sounds like the person you are when you are not trying to be anything. "I thought it was fine," she said. "It was fine," he said, "not as good as November." "You are very specific about your pasta." "I am specific about the things that matter," he said. She looked at him and thought, "Yes, you always have been." She got up to make more tea, which was the thing, the small and daily and perfect thing, the nightly and morning ritual of this flat and this life, and behind her she heard him pick up his estate papers and begin to read, and below them the launderette finally started up its morning cycle, the familiar hum of it rising through the floor, and outside the birds on the aerial concluded whatever they had been consulting about and dispersed to their various days. And the January light came through the kitchen window and fell on the table and the notebook and the mug and the yellow field print on the wall. She thought, "Here we are." She thought, "This is it." She thought, "It is exactly enough."